and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you for that. The next item on our agenda is a citizens' comment period. During the citizens' comment period, anyone who would like to come forward and address this group to the microphone may speak on any item of business that pertains to Goochland County. Well, that said, I'll go ahead and open up the citizen comment period. Anyone like to come forward? Now would be the time. As you come forward, I'll remind you to please give us your name and address and limit your comments to about 3 minutes.
Jonathan Lau, 1521 Mannequin Road. I am a director of the Monacan Soil and Water Conservation District, and I just wanted to give an appreciative recognition to Mr. Stamey and the work he's been doing with the Monacan Board as we look at taking space in the Central High School Cultural Center. I hope I got the name right, but he's really been quite a big assistance to us, and I'm now presuming to speak on behalf of the other directors that we very much appreciate Goochland's outreach on that. I did go to the State Water Control Board meeting on the 28th. The state budget having been approved, Monacan has received what we had worked into our budget as state funding, so we plan to proceed as our operational plan had been. We also discussed about the new WIP water improvement program for the Bay. One concern of mine is it's built on a model. And, you know, when you put certain data in, you can get all kinds of different messages. Our staff has already reached out to the staff at the DEQ who developed the model, just confirming that they had some pretty significant acreage numbers in there for pasture, which is not in concert with what our land use enrollment is. So there were some disparities between what that model was projecting and what we have on our tax rolls. I'm going to switch gears here now because I was not able to participate on Wednesday the 27th when some of your planning was taking place so far as economic development. And my understanding is that tourism has been put on the radar as something that is worthwhile. But before we go to tourism, I also want to just remind the board, agriculture is business. Agriculture is business, and all of Goochland was agriculture before any houses, any stores were built. And since the light's flashing, I might need to come back this evening at 7 and talk a little bit more about tourism. But I do want to, again, iterate, Mr. Stamey's been very helpful, and Monacan is planning to proceed with all due alacrity with the projects that we've got on our plate. So thank you very much. I'll see you at 7.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lyle. Anyone else like to come forward? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the citizen comment period. The next item is the chairman's comments. I just have a few quick comments to make. The first one is last week, local elected leaders from Virginia were invited to the White House for a conference, and 3 of these board members that you see up here attended that meeting. And just to let you know, there was a great deal of discussion around opioid abuse, public education, veterans issues, and of course one of our favorites, broadband access in rural Virginia. There was a lot of information shared, a lot of facts and figures. One of the ones that jumped out at me, which was just beyond the pale, in one federal raid, they confiscated enough fentanyl to kill 26 million people. That's how powerful the drug opioid abuse epidemic has gotten in this country. And so they've encouraged everyone to stay vigilant. And I know there's an awful lot of initiatives, both countrywide and countywide and statewide, to try to address this issue. Oh, and by the way, just parenthetically, no taxpayer dollars were spent. We all traveled on our own expense. So being the fiscally prudent folks that we are. Second thing is our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of the 3 accident victims that perished in Goochland County last week on Route 288. Just an absolute tragedy. Keep them in your thoughts and prayers. The last one is along that line of staying safe. Tomorrow is the 4th of July, Independence Day, and I hope you all find ways to enjoy yourselves, but keep safety in mind as you proceed. We don't want to have any additional accidents tomorrow. So just enjoy the day, enjoy the liberty and freedom that was earned and hard fought for back in the Declaration of Independence and the years that followed. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks and turn it over to the County Administrator. Mr. Badesky, do you have comments to share with the group?
Just a few items, Mr. Chairman. Did want to recognize Ms. Charity Howe from Senator Warner's office here with us today, and thank you for joining us. She's offered her services as a resource to connect with the senator, and we appreciate her time and making sure that Goochland stays in the forefront of the senator's mind with our needs as well. Did want to recognize, as the chairman did, the 4th of July being tomorrow. One of our largest annual events occurs here in Goochland tomorrow evening at 9 p.m. At the Goochland Sports Complex. We will, I think we have one of the best displays in the area. That being said, I think so do thousands of others that tend to show up here in the courthouse area at the same time. And just encourage folks to be patient as we attempt to get out of here tomorrow. It does take a little bit of time. The show is worth it. But remember, our public safety officers are there, away from their families too. Let's just make it all a safe and happy event for everybody in our community. So that's what it's intended for. And if you come, last year was my first opportunity. I'm looking forward to tomorrow myself. So hopefully it'll be a little cooler by then. Shortly, we're going to have a presentation, a mid-year report from our Economic Development Director. But Mr. Matthew Ryan's here. Matthew's last day with the county, unfortunately, will be in a couple weeks. And really, from my perspective, I've had this couple years to work with you now, and really appreciate everything you've done for this county. Really established an economic development program that has set us well as we move forward. And really wish you and your family all the best as you move forward. So thank you for all of your service. We'll hear more from you, and you'll probably hear some more shortly, but I wanted you to hear that from me, and just thank you for all your service. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, it's nice to stop every once in a while and pause. We don't do our work for public praise, and we do it because we all believe it's the right thing to do. And however, every once in a while, it's nice to get recognized in the industry. And again, this year, Goochland County has been recognized for the Certificate of Achievement in Excellence in Financial Reporting. And we take it for granted. We do a great job every year with how we manage our finances, and have been recognized for this. This is not a recognition that every county gets. You have to really meet some pretty high standards. It's a recognition that we don't do alone as county employees or the County Financial Services Department alone. We do this in partnership with our agencies, our constitutional officers, our school system, and it's everybody working well together really positions us for this recognition. And I want to just congratulate the financial services staff and our partners and on another year of a job well done. And so it's funny, we're recognizing last year and we're just starting next year. So it's a process that never ends, but it's something we take extremely serious, and just wanted to congratulate the staff and the team, collective team. So hats off to you guys. So, and we are going to embarrass you by making you come up and take a picture with us for your recognition. So if I can get the Financial Services Department folks to come on up. Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. I do one more.
Another round of applause for our financial staff.
All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Badesky, and congratulations again to our financial staff for another year. Job well done. All you did was set the bar high for next year, so hope you can clear it then, too. Next item on the agenda is any request to postpone agenda items, additions, deletions, or changes to the order of presentation. Board, what's your pleasure? Do you have any suggestions? All right. Seeing none, we'll charge ahead. Next item is the minutes approval. These minutes are for the meeting of June 5th, 2018. They've all been provided in your packet in advance and had a chance to look through them. Are there any additions, changes, or deletions to the minutes from the June 5th, 2018 meeting? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to go ahead and approve the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of June 5th, 2018 minutes.
It's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? It's unanimous. The minutes are approved. Thank you very much for that. Next item is the reports. Our first report is VDOT, and I believe Marshall Wynn is here from VDOT to enlighten us as to what activities you guys have been doing since we last met.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Badesky. This past month, we've had some storm damage, as you're well aware of, on some roads and everything. We had pipe replacement and repairs we had to do. Some of that work was, a couple of areas was Youngstown Road, Duval, and Payne Road, where we had to replace and repair pipes. Riddles Bridge was another one that washed out again one more time. So we made repairs to that. We did asphalt repairs throughout the month. Drainage work, that was a big item for this month. We've completed our second cycle of primary mowing. First cycle of secondary mowing is still ongoing. That contractor still has to mow secondaries east of 522. So they had a couple of breakdowns that have slowed them down a little bit. And I hope they'll get that completed by next week, the end of next week. As far as we had some debris removal, tree removal we had to do due to some of the storms. Well, my Oilville crew did work that accident on 288. They had to supply a detour for that, and like you said, Mr. Peterson, it was a tragedy. It definitely was. We ended up detouring traffic, Tuckahoe Creek to Hockett Road back to 6 is what we had to do, because 288 was completely closed down, and it lasted till late in the morning, as you understand. A couple other items, Ms. LaScalette, I don't know if you've gotten the information about 601 and 648, about the guardrail.
Oh, yes.
Okay. It wasn't warranted in both
Yes,
those
sir.
locations, so traffic engineering did a study on it and checked it out completely. We're looking at 605 Shannon Hill Road and 250 again. Traffic engineering was supposed to be up there today.
Good.
May be able to put another one of those flashing stop signs like we did at Fairgrounds to maybe help that situation.
Think that
But,
might-
more to come once they give us the information. As far as some traffic items, and I know Mr. Peterson is interested in this, 6 at West Creek. Should be starting that work by the end of this month at 6 at West Creek, the signal work there.
Good. This
Hopefully-
month. Good.
Hopefully they'll have that done by fall, before the winter season starts.
Great.
And 288, 250, there's no change in that, so it's still on board to start in 2020. Okay.
Understand.
We do have a public hearing coming up for 522 and 250. I think that's what, 24?
14.
14th?
14.
Okay. I'll be at that. It's going to be at
Where is it going to be? I was going to ask you that, actually.
it's Danny, where is it?
Locust Grove Fire.
Oh, okay.
Locust Grove? Yeah. Okay.
That's what.
Yeah, we'll both be at that public hearing and everything. So I thought it was the 24th.
Oh,
24th of July.
okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want me to send you the
Yeah, would you
information,
please?
the
'Cause
date and time.
I want to let some of my neighbors know.
Okay.
Mr. Thrasher at the TPO meeting last week,
Right.
I thought he said the 14th, but
I think it's
could
the
have heard.
I think it's the
could have heard wrong.
24th,
Okay.
yeah. So, other than that, I really don't have anything else. Do y'all have any questions at all?
Any questions for Mr. Nguyen? Sounds glad.
Mr. Chairman, so, Mr. Nguyen, thank you for checking on those. The other issue that we had were a couple of questions about Tapscott Road, where logging trucks were maybe tearing up the pavement. I
On
think it was
605.
605.
Yeah. Yeah, we went out and looked at that. There was an area where the trucks were coming out of the logging road, and they tore up the shoulder, basically, in part of the pavement, and Sandy Hook has supposedly repaired that area,
Okay,
from what I understand.
okay. I haven't heard one way, yeah.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, one other item. On our consent agenda today is the smart scale applications, which are due by August 1st. And on that list is the I-64 Oilville interchange.
Yes, ma'am.
And it hasn't been that long ago that we mentioned to VDOT that we needed something done at that interchange because traffic was backing up onto the interstate. And of
Correct.
course, the rest stop is right there, so it's just really a bad situation. And we are caught in a time frame where the smart scale applications have to be done by August 1st. I will say that VDOT did come back pretty quickly on that and gave us an answer on that Oilville 64 interchange situation. Their recommendation was a roundabout there. And I just have a couple questions about this. Are there any other interstate interchanges that have a roundabout as the exit in Virginia?
I'm not aware of any,
Okay.
you know, specifically. I'm sure there probably are, and we could look that information up.
Right,
I mean, the only thing that might come close to that is that diversion diamond up at Zines Crossroads.
right. I mean, that still has stoplights, though. Right?
Yeah, it does. It
Lots
does.
of them.
But it works well. I mean,
It does
I
work
mean,
well.
I haven't seen one at an interstate. In New Kent, they have several roundabouts.
But
and
not at interstates.
Not at interstates.
Right.
Not right now.
And I guess my frustration comes from, you know, a problem is identified. VDOT gives us a response. We're under this time frame for an August 1 application, which is not your fault. I mean, that's just the way it is. And it's a take it or leave it. So if we don't approve this, then
You're
we get nothing.
You're 2 years down the road to apply for another.
Exactly, and we
Smart
get nothing,
scale,
and
right.
there's a serious problem on interstate. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bad situation to be in. And have they not looked at traffic lights that are timed? What do they call it? Scheduled or signalized lights?
Let me give you my opinion of roundabouts. They work. Traffic still moves all the time.
Right.
You don't really stop. You might pause for a second,
Right,
and then traffic will move.
right.
The accident history around roundabouts is less than at a traffic light. The traffic light, you have people that stopped all the time. You have rear end accidents and everything. And with a roundabout, the accident history that we've seen is minimized with just maybe side swipes, light side swipes, but in my opinion, roundabouts work well.
Well, I know in the last discussion that this board had and approved the roundabout here at 522
Yes,
and
ma'am.
Fairground Road, we specifically asked if VDOT had any accident data on roundabouts, and we were told no, that VDOT does not have any Virginia data. There's national data, but
Right.
no Virginia data.
Yeah, most of the roundabouts that we're getting into right now, Hanover is building 2 of them. They're currently building one right now at Studley and Rural Point. They have another one planned at Cole Harbor and Creighton Road. And Virginia's just getting into the roundabout type construction.
Well, I think they're probably getting into it because we're given situations where we have no other choice.
Right.
but to do them, so.
I mean, and right-of-way is a concern with, you know, lights and turn lanes and that sort of thing. Once you get into right-of-way and relocating utilities, the cost for signal lights is way higher than a roundabout, bar none.
Well, thank you for your comments. I really appreciate it, Mr. Nguyen. Thanks.
Okay.
Other comments? Mr. Alvarez?
One more question. Mr. Nguyen, we had talked about Mill Forest and the roads, and VDOT came out and did some patching. Is there a plan, and I know, I believe Mr. McNabb had said that there was no funding for repaving this year.
We've got it on next year's schedule.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the patching, I just want to tell the neighbors who
Right.
called me.
Yeah.
So the patching is to prepare or to at least get it to last until next year?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
It made a lot of, I mean, it improved some of the, especially the cul-de-sacs.
Yeah.
A lot, because it was a lot of loose stone.
Yeah,
So
I still need to go in there and see that new development right next to y'all. See where that ties in. Is that tied into Mill Forest
It's,
yet?
it's not tied in yet, and Mr. Thompson said that he's going to leave that until the end.
Okay,
But the road has been cut through, it's just not paved.
right.
And there's a creek, so there's no way anybody can use it today.
Correct. Okay.
So hopefully he'll
But
leave it like that.
eventually it's gonna come through to Mill Forest. That's
Yeah,
what it's gonna do.
And that area, that Mill Trace Lane is in pretty bad shape. It needs, really needs paving, and I think he was concerned that if he completed that connection now, that he would be blamed for the damage to the road.
Okay.
But anyway, next year would be good. I'll let everybody know.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, in follow-up to Ms. Lachelette's question, Mr. Drumright just shared that there is a roundabout off of 95 in Colonial Heights, off that interchange.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I'll find out what the exit is.
That's it? Okay.
There's one on, exit 150 on I-81.
So this wouldn't be precedent setting.
Being
Like,
constructed.
I mean, I think the genesis of the question might be, is there any special consideration around putting one at an exit as opposed to just putting it at the intersection of two roads? Is there anything you can think of that would be specific to that,
No.
that would cause concern?
That's a pretty long exit, so I think there's enough room for backup and,
Okay,
Now, I know what the concern is. The traffic queues up in the evenings and it gets on 64. I've seen
Yep.
it many times.
it's very dangerous.
People,
very dangerous.
people go around, people trying to make a left and turn around at the store and come right back by
Yeah.
everybody that's stopped and doing the right thing, you know, so I understand.
Is
Okay.
probably-
Anything else? I've got two real quick ones. I think the first one you may already be aware of, which is I got a couple of calls from Mannequin Farms on traffic calming issues. Have you had any conversation around that? No.
In what regard?
This would be
What-
in Mannequin Farms?
I mean,
The traffic calming would be around speeding.
the
Evidently,
speed
they're-
limit in there is 25, so what, I
So,
mean, if you do any traffic calming type things, they will have to fund that. I mean, what are they thinking, speed bumps? And I don't recommend that kind of stuff for snow removal
they're-
issues.
you know, where you've got habitual speeders going through there well above the posted limit,
Call
then the
Mr.
question.
Agnew. Call law enforcement then,
you need to
so,
get the sheriff involved.
yeah.
You've been
VDOT
down
will
that
just
road
increase,
already.
they'll
I know.
increase the speed limit to 35 like that.
You don't want, you don't want to do a speed study. There's already 25 in there, okay?
So, you're viewing this obviously as a law enforcement as opposed to anything that VDOT could do. I don't know what the options are, putting out those, signal signs that tell you how fast you're going and that you're speeding, or striping the ground or putting in speed, but none of that stuff is really, these are public roads, these are not private roads, so it's
Correct,
not in
yeah,
a
I
neighborhood,
know,
but,
I know.
but you're out of suggestions or ideas. Maybe
Call law enforcement.
pass an ordinance that says people have to obey the law. Is that-
Hey,
Okay.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, all right. Well, anyway, I told them that I'd ask.
okay.
And I'll relay your answer.
And then it's probably the folks that live in there that are speeding, so,
Well,
Go ahead and say yeah.
They'll,
They'll call
we
you when you
won't,
get a ticket.
we won't get into who's doing it and who's not. Allegedly, there are drive-through. It's like nobody in Goodson ever breaks the law, so people that pass through Goodson. So,
Okay.
you know. The other one, real quick, is on the budget cycle. Now that the General Assembly has finally passed a budget, what is your VDOT's budget awareness cycle? So that, in other words, do you know how much this new budget would provide in terms of an increase or decrease over prior year funding, or how does that work for VDOT, your budget funding?
You talking about area allocations and everything?
Yes, exactly, so that we know whether or not you have as much money as you had last year to work with,
We're
or
gonna be
less.
within 5% of what we had last year.
Do you think there would be a 5% increase or decrease, or just
Decrease this year.
a decrease in funding?
For us, yeah. For our maintenance staff and everything. 5% less.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Huh, because I know that obviously the total budget's larger than prior year, and there's about a 4% increase in tax revenues, so, but you're getting less.
In the maintenance field. They might be putting more funding on construction and paving work, schedule work. Maintenance replacement is what I call it. Paving paving roadways that are already in the system, or resurfacing them, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So
So we're going to need you to do more with less, is that the?
we do it every year.
All
Do
right,
it
super.
every year.
All right, well, those are the only two things I had real quick for you. So
Okay.
thank you very much for that. Anything else for Mr. Nguyen?
No, sir.
Super, we appreciate your being here and fielding our questions, so
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Have a happy 4th. Okay, next up, we have Ms. Kelly Parrish who's going to introduce some new county staff, and I believe we have a number of individuals to welcome.
We do. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the
Good
board. Mr. Badesky, I'm Kelly Parrish, Director of Human Resources. And yes, I'm happy to say that we have several announcements for you today.
Great.
On behalf of the county administration, I'm pleased to announce the arrival of staff in the Commissioner of Revenue's office, General Services, Fire and EMS, and Parks and Recreation. Due to her retirement, Katie Connell joined the Commissioner of Revenue staff as a Deputy 1 on June 18th. Katie had been working part-time in the Human Resources office, so we wish her well in her new position. Due to a resignation, Carl Lacey was rehired by the county as a ground supervisor on June 18th. Carl previously worked for our General Services Department, so we welcome his return. Due to a resignation, Brian Alden began working as a firefighter EMT on July 2nd, and Brian is here today. Please stand.
Brian.
Brian comes to us with experience from the Capital Region Airport Commission and also as a volunteer with Hanover County since 2006. So welcome, day 2. Yay.
Tomorrow's a holiday.
Let's see, due to the approval of a new position this fiscal year, Ashley Sneed will be the new recreation coordinator with the Parks and Recreation Department. And Ashley is here as well.
Hey, Ashley.
Ashley had been working as a part-time recreation aide with us and moved to this full-time position on July 2nd. So day 2 in her new position as well.
Yay. So far, so good.
Yeah. Due to resignations, Kyle Lamb and Virginia McLean joined the Parks and Recreation staff as part-time recreation assistants in June, and Nicholas Brognano and Kaylee Eckert also joined the Parks and Recreation staff as seasonal aides for the summer camp programs. So we welcome them all.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Parrish. Welcome, one and all. Round of applause. Okay, the next couple of items on the agenda, planning and development activity and the accounts payable are in the package. Are there any comments or questions about either of those two items? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and charge ahead. Next item on the agenda is a consent agenda. We've got a number of different items on the consent agenda, and perhaps at this point I'll ask Mr. Badesky if he wouldn't mind giving us just a very summary overview of each of the items on the consent agenda.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I did want to just call attention, staff brought to my attention that there is one thing on the back of your agenda before we start the consent, Mr. Chairman, and I will announce this again at the 7 o'clock. We are announcing a 1 o'clock major thoroughfare plan at the August 7th meeting. We're actually going to suggest moving that to the September meeting. And so there will be a change to that, and we'll notice it properly. So just wanted to share that at this point. But and again, I will announce that at the September meeting is a change, so.
Great, thank you.
We had hoped to be a little bit further along in the process, and we just want to get it right. Okay, as the chairman introduced with the consent agenda, these items are items that we've reviewed in some form or fashion in the past, or will be referring for further review. And so I just wanted to take a little bit of opportunity to go through. I think Ms. Lachelette did a nice intro to the Smart Scale project during the review with VDOT. But as she said, this is an application that we have an opportunity to submit once every 2 years, and that application deadline comes up here August 1st. And so with your approval today, we would be submitting the following projects. The first is the Interstate 64 Ashland Road interchange. That's being proposed to be reconstructed as a divergent diamond interchange. The second is actually the one that was discussed earlier. That's the Interstate 64 Oilville Road interchange. And just for folks that may also not understand the value of a roundabout, or that why VDOT would have recommended a roundabout, the process that we use, these being state roads that are maintained, we have to submit to VDOT for study and recommendation solutions to some of these challenges. Once we get the data back, which we just received within the past 30 days, and we did question it, we're limited in some time on more dialogue with VDOT to meet this application deadline. And so while some may prefer not a roundabout solution here, if we do not apply within the next window, we will absolutely not have an opportunity for funding in the next 2 years. And so I believe there will be more discussion and dialogue on this interchange as we move forward, but did believe, based on the data we have today, we did not want to miss an application deadline to receive some funding. So that remains in the project list. Route 288. We all know that this is a major challenge for us. What's being proposed here is more of an interim solution that really works to construct new southbound auxiliary lanes between Broad Street and Tuckahoe Creek Parkway. This project is believed to do some alleviation of the traffic through there. There are also other projects being submitted that don't show up on our list that should also assist with 288 challenges. Project number 4 is the Three Trop Road connection. This is actually primarily connecting Three Trop Road by constructing a bridge and main line on Route 288. And the last project is Ashland Road widening. This is the one that would actually widen the section between Broad Street and Interstate 64. All of the projects outside of the Oilville interchange have been in other plans and projects in the past, and we're submitting for consideration for funding. So that's the first item that you have on your consent agenda. Moving along in your consent agenda, the second item is actually to refer to the Planning Commission, and this is actually to address public utility lots. I'm sorry, that's number 3. So that item is actually for us to address an issue that's actually currently not in our code to accommodate utility service lots. The second item is to amend Article 12, and this is relating to setbacks for townhouse lots. This was something that we didn't have addressed, and as you know, the most recent H.H. Hunt project had townhouse lot setbacks, and this is to get something on the books as it relates to that. Item number 4 is to request a public hearing for consideration of an ordinance that would allow golf courts or utility vehicles on certain public roads. This is an opportunity to consider with certain standards the use of those types of vehicles on certain roads. And so there's information in the packet, and certainly a public hearing will give us more information and feedback as it relates to that item. Item number 5 on your consent agenda. This is actually a clarification that we identified in past review, and this is primarily to look at when you're adding properties into the Tuckahoe Creek Service District, which ones would have the 20% additional fee added that is a requirement in our code as a penalty, so to speak. And so this was to provide some clarification to which property would be required to pay those fees and or not. And the last item that you have here is a request for authorization to set a public hearing for the September board meetings. And this is for a potential removal of a property from the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. Your code sets out standards that allow for additions and removals. This is the first one that you're hearing within the past 2-year cycle here. So with that, Mr. Chairman, staff is available for any questions regarding any of the items on the consent agenda, and we stand ready for those questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Badesky. Just as I look at these, there was a long list. He went through about 6 items. I think 5 of the 6 are really just either referrals or permission to set dates for public hearings. So these are not decisions. These are just referrals or establishing dates for public hearings with public input. So part of the reason they're on a consent agenda is just to set the dates, but there won't be any decisions made here. The other one is this smart scale, and you did mention the 5 or 6 items that we're putting in. Perhaps also worthy of mention would be an item that the TPO is submitting as part of their package, and I think it's on the back page of the smart scale in the book. We might just mention, for a lot of folks know that Route 288 down toward the bridge, the southern portion of Goochland, backs up quite a bit, and I think TPO is going to be submitting a smart scale presentation or application to try and alleviate some of that traffic problem. It bears worth mentioning, it's not us doing it, but it's been an inconvenience for a lot of members of Goochland County, a lot of citizens in Goochland County, and so there'll be a resolution or a solution put forth by the TPO. Those are the only 2 comments I had. Other folks have comments on the consent agenda items? All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, we've got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All, isn't that a voice for this all? Yeah, all in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, it's unanimous. The consent agenda is approved. Thank you very much for that. Now we shift gears into new business. The first item of new business today is a presentation by Joanne Hunter on residential development and undeveloped building lots. So welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Brodesky, Joanne Hunter, Director of Community Development. What we have today is just an informational item. No action is needed, but we did want to give you an update of where the county is on number of approved building lots. The last time we gave this update to the board was December of 2016. As you know, we had several rezoning cases and additional new projects have come through since that time, so it seemed like an appropriate time to update it. Just to explain how the map works a little bit, it includes all subdivisions that are currently active in the county that are either large subdivisions or ones that were rezoned for. It does not include things like minor subdivisions. If someone has a piece of parcel and they're doing a by right split to 3 lots, or if they're doing a split to a family member or things like that, it does not include those. So these are more of our larger subdivisions. The greens pullouts is the location of the subdivision, and the number next to it is the number of lots. The blue pullouts are the pending zone, they have approved zoning or pending application. It's not, I'm sorry, the green are approved, the blue are pending. Everybody has a map in front of them. There are extra maps on the back if anybody in the audience wants one. We do this every year for the schools, so you can see it also shows the 3 school districts. You can see where the subdivisions are located. It is interesting to note that, you know, while we encourage growth and designate a growth area, and you do see several pullouts in that area, there are subdivisions throughout the county, and we are seeing development in all areas of the county, not just in our designated growth area. So let's take a look at some of the numbers. So right now, with zoning approval, we have 3,191 lots approved. So what this spreadsheet shows you is the first column gives you the subdivision name. The asterisk ones are ones that are age-restricted. We have 2 approved age-restricted developments. That's the H.H. Hunt and the Erickson. And then 2 pending applications that are age-restricted. That would be under the blue column. Below is the Cameron General Contractors and Parkside Village. So the first column is information that based on where they are in the process or how often we've had contact with them of what we think their construction schedule will be. As you can see, there's a lot of 0 to 3 years. Those are the subdivisions that are really rolling along. The 1 to 3 years are ones that are going through the sort of the engineering process right now and will probably be developing next year. And then you'll see some that are 5 years out, and those are ones that have been on the books for a long time. They're not active, and we haven't heard anything from the applicant. Somebody could come in tomorrow and make those active, but we just haven't heard from them. So the first column shows you how many lots were approved, how many lots, then there's recorded lots, and then how many lots already have permits. So of those 3,191 lots, 538 already have permits. And right now, you can see vacant lots, with vacant recorded lots, we have 225 in the county. People could pull building permits immediately on those. If you combine that with our pending applications, the grand total is 3,685 lots that are pending, either with zoning or pending zoning approval. Of those, 1,850 are age-restricted. And if you could do comparison to when we brought this to the board in 2016, at that time we had 1,991 lots with approval. So that number you can see has jumped up considerably this year. Almost 1,000 lots were added with zoning approval over this past year. And then we had, back then, we had about 576 pending lots, and that included things like Mannequin that we've pulled off the list that's still potentially out there. That list also included active developments that are already closed out, such as Parkside, Section 1, 2, and 3. That was on that list before. That's completely built out. So you can see that we've had a considerable number of residential lots between 2016 and 2018. Do you want to just go over some of the number of certificates of occupancy so you can see how these sort of play out? In 2016, we had 137 certificate of occupancies. 2017, we had 173. That represents about a 2% growth rate, which is actually what we planned for in our comp plan. So while these numbers seem very extreme, they are coming in at a slow pace and a manageable pace. That doesn't mean that we couldn't get a bunch all in, because we do have all of these approved. But right now, we've been able to manage it. It has been coming in at a reasonable pace. So far this year, we've only had 6 months, but we've got 76 COs, so we're about on pace with the last 2 years. And I do want to point out that about 30% of those COs occur in subdivisions that are not included on this map. So those are the ones that are family divisions or minor subdivisions. Also want to talk to you why we have this 3685 lots. We are on conversations with other people for about potentially 500 new developments, 500 new lots with different developments. Some of those are the Mannequin Town project, could potentially come back at any time. The Wilton property, which some of you may remember came through a rezoning case about 3 years ago. That's on a property between Rockville and Mannequin Road. My understanding is that is under contract again, and they will be filing a pre-application in the next few months. We're also talking with developers for 2 additional projects in the Fairground Road area. So we are continuing to see considerable interest still in residential projects in the county. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, no action is required. We just wanted to kind of give you a state of the union of where we are, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions for Ms. Hunter?
Are you overwhelmed?
Well, first of all, I think this is very helpful to have this overview on a periodic basis, and maybe every 2 years is okay, but this is good information. As I look, if you go back to the
Chart.
Yes. The asterisks are age-restricted.
Yes, sir.
And as I look at number of potential lots, so third column by zoning, it looks like the two largest numbers, the 1,200 and the 520, are both age-restricted. If I total those up, that's over 1,700 out of the 3,000. So you're not quite two-thirds, but you're over half, well over half, maybe 60% of these potential lots approved is in age-restricted and would obviously reduce the demand for county services somewhat, in that the schools would largely be not impacted by those developed by 60% of what's here. And that's just an observation more than anything else. The other comment, though, is on these prior approved, which is kind of the pipeline or the backlog. As I understand it, under state law currently, we cannot take these into consideration when we're looking at proffers. You're nodding your head. So while we know these are out there and we know we have them identified by lot, by location, by everything, and the potential impact it might cause, we're not allowed to take that into consideration. Is that?
That's correct. Certainly what you may be talking about when you're determining capacity.
Yes.
These are not eligible for consideration until a home is built on them under the way the proffer law reads today. And as you know, Goochland County still has pending with the General Assembly an amendment to the proffer law that would change that and allow us to consider what we call committed capacity, these
Yes.
types of things. And that's not yet been approved or denied by the General Assembly. It's waiting for the proffer party. But that is a concern. Capital facilities shouldn't be planned after the body that needs to sit in a seat is already occupying a home. But that's how the current law reads.
I understand. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Those were really just observations more than anything else, but other than just to appreciate the update and to do this on a periodic basis going forward, just so we can.
Will do.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody, anything else? Okay, thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is the animal shelter update. Mr. Stamey?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Derek Stamey, Deputy County Administrator for Operations. I have the great pleasure of providing you an update on the animal shelter construction as of today.
We have copies of the slides. Good.
Okay, to really have an understanding of where we are and where we're going, it's good to look at where we've been, and that's what you have in front of you is a picture of our currently empty animal shelter, and more on why it's empty in a few slides. But just to give you a quick recap, our current shelter, our current empty shelter is in violation of multiple state requirements. Per the state's veterinary office, the current shelter is approximately 2,000 square feet, and it struggles in some key areas as it pertains to providing services for our pets and other animals within the community and for our residents. It struggles with its HVAC systems. The public interface is very poor as it pertains to adopting animals, and the administrative space is really a struggle for staff, and storage is a struggle as well. You juxtapose that photo with the rendering of our new building. As a reminder, the new structure will be located approximately right behind where the current animal shelter is located at 1900 Hidden Rock Lane in Maidens. The new structure is approximately 13,941 square feet. The goal of the structure was to meet all of the needs for both staff and our animals and public interface for the next 25 years, and will also, and most importantly, address all of our state requirements related to animal protection facilities. Just to give you an overview of our animal shelter project team, of course, Goochland County, Bowers Corporation Incorporated, which is our general contractor for the project. Dominion 7 Architects out of Lynchburg is our architecture firm that has been working with us on the design and coordinating efforts with us with our contractor. Schnabel Engineering has been handling all of the on-site testing, ensuring that all of the materials and all the efforts of the contractor are up to speed. And McDonough, Bolliard, and Peck is our contracted project management firm. Just to give you an update from a broken ground perspective and then where we are with our current contractual completion dates. The project broke ground August 1st, 2017, roughly 11 months ago. The original substantial completion date was August 27th of this year, with the original final completion date being September 27th of this year. Things happen during the course of a project, whether it's weather or other construction changes, design changes, things of that nature. And currently, after sifting through and working with the contractor and our architect, our current contractual try saying that 3 times fast. Our current contractual substantial completion date is October 3rd of this year, with our current contractual final completion date of November 3rd of this year. And again, these completion dates are subject to change. The project is currently 45% complete based upon our most recently updated project schedule. And again, we've had several factors that have contributed to the delay in this project. We've seen some significant weather impacts. We have the wettest spring on record, I believe, record rainfalls in both May and June. And we also experienced some extreme cold during the winter months, as well as some snowfall. If you recall, back in December and January, we had temperatures down around 1 or 2 degrees in some areas. And even with a 1-inch snowfall, that snow remained on site with frozen ground for weeks at a time. So the weather has not cooperated as it pertains to this project. In addition to the weather, we've had several challenges related to the project itself. We discovered a drain field that we did not know existed, which required some extra work. We experienced some issues with both our water and electric utilities. We located a water line that we didn't know existed. So we've experienced some challenges along the way. We've also seen some design changes. And also, I can't stress enough how complex and important the foundation is for this building. It has 91 individual drains in that building. The single most important element of an animal shelter is the foundation and the drain system. Couple that with the necessary electrical that needs to be in the foundation itself, the proper at-grade concrete pour. All of that needs to be done appropriately. Otherwise, you've sunken a lot of effort and time and money into a building that's not going to meet the demand that it's slated for. And this aerial view, courtesy of one of our Pet Lovers members and donors, they actually fly a drone out and take some photos for us and update us every now and then. And this actually gives you a good illustration of what I'm talking about. If you look very closely, you can see all those individual drains and all the individual kennels that you see there and all the stub outs for all the plumbing and all the electrical. The yellow color that you see there is actually the water vapor barrier that has to go down prior to the pouring of the concrete slab. So it's a pretty intricate project. Some additional items of note: the sewer line, courtesy of Public Utilities, they've done an absolutely fabulous job. Matt Longshore and Richard and Todd in the very early stages of working with us on this project to extend a sewer line from J. Sargent Reynolds under Fairgrounds and then boring it along Fairgrounds up to the animal shelter. That's already sitting, ready to go. We just have to make the connection. They've done a great job with that. In addition to the sewer line, we've also been working with Dominion Energy to extend 3-phase power from the intersection of 522 and Fairgrounds up along Fairgrounds Road so that the shelter is equipped with enough power to be able to operate. There's some significant systems within the building from an HVAC standpoint and other systems in the building to make it work, and we have to ensure that there's proper power. Some upcoming milestones of note: the below-grade waterproofing and backfill around the facility is slated to be completed within the next couple of weeks. Roof trusses and roof installation, we're actually expecting trusses to be on that building within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Once that happens, they can start roofing in and enclosing that structure, and that's a significant milestone because once you get that building under roof, you're going to be coordinating a lot of indoor and interior trades, and you'll see that 45% start to ramp up exponentially above and beyond what the schedule displays now. Next Monday, we're actually slated to demo the existing shelter, and more on that later. But we're in the process. We've already vacated the existing shelter, and we have a temporary location, and I'll discuss that in a little bit. But people are excited. I think we may actually move some bleachers up from the baseball fields and have an extra fireworks show just for the demo of the existing shelter. That will be Monday. I'm working on a time for that. Pet Lovers is aware of it. I think we're going to hand out sledgehammers and ice cream cones if it's still hot. And I'll keep everyone posted on the status of that. Again, we're going to be coordinating a lot of interior trades to speed up this work. And once that shelter is down, the old shelter, there's going to be a significant amount of soil that's exported off-site and a lot of general site work that was scheduled to be done on the back end of the project. One of the reasons that we vacated early was to speed up the project and to make it more accessible to the contractor. Originally, we wanted to keep the current shelter operational almost to the end of completion, but we found that it's a tough site to work on, and it's not good for our staff, it's not good for the contractor, and it's not good for our citizens who have to interface with staff. So that was one of the reasons that we decided to leave that site early. As I mentioned previously, the shelter relocation, effective Monday, the animal shelter will be temporarily relocated to 2748 Dogtown Road, which is the Central High School complex. And if you look on the screen here, you can see an arrow. Where in the world are we going to house this at Central High School? Well, it's actually going to be behind the gym. You can see the road frontage there at Dogtown Road, the front of the school. If you drive around behind the gym, we have signage out there so that you can't miss it. We've actually renovated the old shop area there at Central to house, and you can see the photograph there. General Services and Animal Protection worked very hard. Lisa was there last week helping move. Everybody really came together under a very tight time frame and was able to get this facility up to speed to where we wanted to relocate, and got us moved and operational in about a 2.5-week window. So kudos to General Services and Animal Protection. But again, going back, we will be relocated at this location. Operating hours will remain the same. We'll be closed on Sundays and Mondays. Operating hours are Tuesday through Saturday, 9 to 2. No anticipated changes there. And Animal Protection will remain there until the completion of the new shelter. We are going to wait until final completion so that there's no finger pointing going on as to who dinged up what as far as the drywall goes or who scratched this surface or that surface. We're going to wait till it's done and then relocate everybody at that time. The temporary location includes a very nice office space for staff, a cat room, and 12 dog kennels. We even have a veterinary wing, so you'll have to check it out. It's an ongoing project. One thing I did want to note is all improvements to this area can be reused in the future if the need arises. You know, there were questions about, okay, we're going to relocate and we're going to spend money on this location, but is that a sunk cost? No, it isn't. All of the upgrades that we made to that location can be reused if the county so determines in the future that we need to relocate another operation to that space. Future outlook, the existing shelter is scheduled, again, to be torn down the week of July 9th. We're shooting for Monday. We expect to be under roof by mid-July. Once under roof, our emphasis will be on internal construction and finishes. And we are very optimistic for a late fall, early winter 2018 opening of the animal shelter. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our Pet Lovers organization. In speaking with them this morning, they have raised, from pledges and cash on hand, $1.522 million to support this endeavor. It's just, I continue to be amazed by the generosity of the community and their efforts to raise money for this project. It's amazing. And right now, they're actually looking to raise $1.65 million in total. And the work doesn't stop with the capital project. We're also working, Tim Clough and myself and Mr. Badesky are working with the Pet Lovers to figure out what is the future role. It doesn't end with just bricks and mortar. You know, what is going to be their function moving forward to help support the operational efforts of the county shelter. And just a recap of some of the special events that they've utilized to raise money. They've had Pets and Pints at Licking Hole. They've had a fishing tournament, all kinds of different events, a rescue dog Olympics at Hardywood. And they are preparing to send out some additional information on taking it over the top. You can see the fire hydrant there for $1.5 million, but they want to take it up to $1.65 million. So there's more special event and fundraising opportunities from the Pet Lovers. And that's their website there at the bottom of the slide. And with that, before I go to the video, I've got a construction progression video I wanted to show you that really highlights some things, but are there any questions before we get to that?
Any questions for Derek? I think where you got us excited about the video. I think.
Absolutely, I'm excited about the video. Before we get started on that, I did want to stress, I did mention the complexity of the foundation. I think you'll see that as we move through the video. I'm not going to narrate it at all. It's got music set to it, but you'll see it start with the fine grade and the flat grade of where the building pad's going to be, and then you'll see the excavation of the footers. And as the video moves through the seasons, you'll see some snow, you'll see some mud, and then you'll see that foundation start to take place and see everything that goes into it, and then the walls come up. So with that, yeah. That's it. Any questions?
Any questions? Just a couple things real quick. First of all, thank you for all your efforts on this. This is truly amazing. One of the really, truly special things about Goochland County is the generosity of the citizens. And to have just witnessed Goochland Cares opening up a $7.1 million facility for the citizens and people of Goochland County, and then to see that followed by a $1.5 million incremental addition to take care of our pets and animals, all funded by the generosity of our citizens. It's just phenomenal. I don't know any other jurisdiction that could even begin to come close on a per capita or per dollar basis. And so thank you for all you do. I notice we have our animal protection officer here with us. Would you like to add or delete anything that was said in this presentation, or just concur with everything Derek said? Very good. Well, thank you, Tim, for all you do on the ground. Yeah. So that's kind of all I had. Anybody else? Just thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
Good job. And keep us posted in the progress going forward. So,
You got it.
thank you. Great. Okay, that was the animal shelter update. Next item on our agenda is the presentation on information technology. Randy, would you like to come forward?
Good afternoon, board members, Mr. Badesky, Randy Buzzard, IT Director for the county, and thank you for allowing me to present the annual information technology report.
And Randy, you've got the remote over there, right?
I got it. So, as an overview of the IT department, first and foremost, we're an internal service department. So we service the other county departments to make sure they have all the technology needs that are required of them and to do their jobs. So we're responsible for procurement, installation, and maintenance of all the county's technology resources. We also provide help desk support for desktops, handhelds, mobile computers, and we manage the telephone system, both here in the courthouse area and some other remote sites. And IT also includes the Geographic Information System, or GIS, for the county, which provides mapping services for the departments and for the public. Some of our missions and goals, we want to provide a high level of customer service in a timely manner. We research new technologies and develop some in-house applications whenever it's prudent. We also have a lot of off-the-shelf technology or applications. And we do our research and evaluation for both internal service departments, for other departments in the county, and to enhance citizen services as well. An overview of our annual budget from FY18. We were at net county funds of around 1.1 million. Of that, our operating cost is about 472,000, and the rest of that budget is for personnel. We currently have 7 FTEs and 1 part-time. I made a note there at the bottom of this slide that we are unfortunately losing 2 longtime county employees. My assistant director, Jim Sutton, and our programmer analyst, Mark Choi, are retiring at the end of this month. So we are in the process of rehiring for those positions, and they will be greatly missed. They're great assets to the county. So this is our current org chart. It's pretty flat. I have 7 direct reports right now, but when we hire the new assistant director, this is what the org chart will look like. We're changing up a little bit. I'll have 4 direct reports, and the new assistant director will then have 3 direct reports. So I just wanted to talk a little bit in the next few slides about our goals and how they tie in with what the board has set forth for county strategic goals. We have a goal to provide technology solutions that increase efficiency and effectiveness for all our county agencies, and that ties into your board directive, county strategic goal number 1, which is the efficient, effective, and transparent government with an emphasis on customer service excellence. We want to operate and maintain a reliable and secure computer network, and that ties into both county strategic goal number 1 and number 3. And number 3 is excellence in financial management. We want to cultivate an environment where strategic planning and innovation are encouraged, and also have a goal to complete our strategic plan with participation from all of our county departments, and that will tie into goals 1, 3, and 5. And 5 is a positive work environment with highly qualified and a diverse workforce for the county strategic goal. And finally, to continue providing technical support for our public safety agencies and maintaining their critical technologies, and that ties into county strategic goal number 4, which is the high quality core services including education, public safety, and community health. The next slide, I'm just showing a few of what I think are some of the important performance measures that we're tracking in IT. We do provide help desks for the entire county, and these numbers are on a per monthly basis, and we're averaging around 185 tickets per month. Of those, 4 are closed, or closed within 4 hours, or is 86%. Of the remaining that are not closed within 4 hours, they are closed within 24 hours at a 95% rate. So we think we're doing a pretty good job. Some other measures we're tracking. Our county website gets visited on an average of 17,000, around 17,000 per month. We are tracking GIS website users at an average of around 3,200 a month. We are blocking email spam at an average of 215,000 per month with our Office 365 application. Our endpoint securities for our desktops here in the county and our laptops and our mobile computers, we're averaging blocking around 27 viruses a month and 61 or 62 malware detections per month. Next couple slides, we want to pat ourselves on the back a little bit and highlight some of our accomplishments from last year. Technology-wise, we were involved in opening the new ECC at Public Safety, also Central High and Goochland Cares. And we upgraded our county internet pipe from 200 to a 500 megabyte pipe. And in that project, we also moved our voice over IP lines from copper to fiber from one vendor to another. And it's going to result next year in a savings of around $22,000 per year for doing all these changes. Public safety, we upgraded our software for our CAD software, computer-aided dispatch software. Last year, we also went through a lot of MDT replacements. I think we replaced about 80% of the MDT fleet last year. We upgraded switches and routers all over the county, and we always do an annual fiscal PC refresh, which are your desktops and laptops for the other county departments. We implemented and initiated for our end users a cyber security training program, which helps them avoid things like clicking on the wrong thing in emails, identity theft, both for work and at home. It carries over into their home personal life as well. We implemented a social media archives solution for all of our county social media sites. We made improvements in this room, the boardroom here, for streaming our meeting live and for on-demand video options up on our county website. We put in place a new help desk software for the county, which includes inventory package, which we never had before, to track IT assets all over the county. It also has a new mobile device management package, which will replace our old one, and it has a software patch management. We do software patching for Microsoft. We have done that always, but this new one will do things like patching our Adobe and our Java and other things that the Microsoft one did not, and that's included in this new help desk software. All told, it's going to result in a savings of around $6,000 per year, and we're getting a little bit more for bang for our buck, so to say. We also participated with the schools in finishing up the Bird Fiber project, and last but not least, we kicked off our new financial and HR system project. Next couple slides are talking about things we got upcoming, so in the next year. The implementation of the financial system management project, it's going to be a big project, going to encompass 2 years total, but in the next year we're doing the finance side, and a lot of my staff's going to be involved in that, from migration to training. We're also, GIS-wise, we're working on replacing our 911 switch for public safety, which will be next generation 911 capable, which is driven on GIS instead of old spreadsheet anti-alley data for location-based services. And also GIS is working on the 2020 census that's coming down the pipe. We are installing new hardware and software for our, basically, it's our SAN and virtual machine environment, but it's basically county servers is what it is. And going from a 1 gig backbone to a 10 gig backbone, which should vastly improve speed of our servers on our local network. We are moving our county web filter right now. We share it with the schools. So we're getting a new one. We're separating from the school's web filter, which should improve speed for both us and for the schools. We are planning to do a refresh for our county website. We're upgrading our GIS hardware and software. And as part of the county space study renovation, we're involved in that. Anytime there's a move or a renovation, computer equipment needs moved, cabling needs moved, we're coordinating all that. In addition to that, IT is going through a renovation themselves upstairs, and we are gaining 1 additional office space and 1 additional cube space. Also, we're working on countywide broadband projects for citizens. We plan to transition Fire Company 4 from microwave, which is the current connection, to fiber, utilizing that Bird Fiber project that we worked with the schools to put in. One of my capital improvement project funding is to replace the HVAC system in the IT server room. It's going on 10 years old, I'm told, by facilities, so that needs done. And the last few things are some stuff we're researching, two-factor authentication, some cloud faxing solutions. I'm working with Buildings Inspections Department on researching permitting software. I think that's in the FY20 budget. And we're researching document management solutions and moving our voice over IP phones and voicemail to the cloud, and records retention solutions for text messaging. So at this point, I'll answer any questions. Sorry, I don't have a cute little video to show you.
No real cute video from IT. Questions for Randy?
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Has the, Randy, the new emergency center, any issues with supporting that new equipment and software and radios? Or is it any issues with that or complexities that?
For the radio system, there's been some challenges with the radio system, I know. I'd rather have Don answer that question. I don't want to say something that's incorrect, but.
But have your folks have to spend a lot of time with that, or?
Not really. Most of it was done when I came on board, but I do have some old equipment on the towers that I need to get off of there. I know that, and I think we're set to sell one of the towers. Is that correct? And I had to do some stuff with the ham radio operators to get their portion of it working recently.
Mr. Chairman, part of the vagueness from Randy may be because the radio project has been primarily done under the Sheriff's Department leadership. There have been some challenges that have required, even before Randy, some transition support on. There's some existing equipment, as mentioned, that's going to be transferred over in the next year. But I think Chief's here, I don't want to put him on the spot, but there are issues that have been being worked through. For the large majority of issues, our radio system is much more accurate and capable than the old system. But anytime you're integrating new systems, old systems, working through, there have been some challenges that I know they're continuing to work through. There are basic kinds of things that your guys had to deal with as it relates to mouse integration with multiple monitors. If you've been down there, the new systems just had different capabilities than we had in our old closet, basically, is what it was. And so they've worked through a lot of those kinds of issues, but for the most part, I think the day-to-day operations are running pretty smooth.
Yeah, I know the coverage is, well, a lot better than it was previously, countywide.
Another question. How do you feel? Do you think you have the resources you need for the finance replacement project?
We think so. We have one person on staff that we've named as a county project manager that's a part of IT, and we've also contracted with an outside vendor to help with the project management as well. You guys know we went over in 2x2s with you, and so far we're going along on schedule. So.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, other things for Randy?
All right, thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Next up is Economic Development, Mr. Matt Ryan.
He didn't actually have a report on the agenda, but because he was leaving, we assigned him an expert.
Good, good.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Matthew Ryan, Director of Economic Development. Before I get into the update, I would like to just collectively thank each and every one of you for the support you've given me the last few years. At the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Brodesky mentioned a lot has been accomplished, none of which could have been done without your support, so thank you very much. Somewhat bittersweet giving my last report, but hopefully it's all good news and you won't beat me up too bad with questions at the end. So without further ado, here is the 2018 mid-year update. If you recall, economic development runs calendar year as opposed to, I think, every other organization here, every other department is fiscal year. So this is a calendar year basically from January until June 30th. So it just ended, I guess 2 or 3 days ago. So I'm going to quickly touch on the metrics that I'm normally reporting on and then spend a bulk of the time discussing strategic planning and the joint session that was just held last week on the 27th, and then leave room for questions. So notable projects, there's a lot going on in the county right now. If you've been down Broad Street, you've seen Drive Shack is going vertical, Sheltering Arms, there's a bunch of heavy equipment there clearing. There's heavy equipment at the Notch Retail clearing the pad for the hotel. The following retail, still construction going on at Bristol, Capital One. Audi is open for business and selling cars. And still have the breweries on here. Hardywood has submitted plans for their amphitheater, and I've already been talking, I guess it was last week or the weekend before, I was out there to another large crowd as usual, and I got to talk to Eric for a few minutes, and I think they're beyond overwhelmed with the amount of traffic they've been getting. So already kind of looking at what that next step might be to alleviate some of the traffic issues, and just, again, they're blown away by the support they've seen thus far. So hopefully that'll continue and it'll result in some more capital investment. So getting into the metrics, capital investment numbers, again, last year, if you recall, was a record year. This year we're already at $60 million halfway through the year, so on track to possibly get close to that. I don't know that there's enough in the hopper to get up to the 120, but I think certainly on track to break 100 million again. So it's been a great couple years. All in has been a little over $450 million in the last 5.5 years. And then looking at that capital investment track over 10 years, again, really 2012 starts picking up. There's a little bit of a dip there in 13, 14, and 15, but it's picked up and done good ever since. Assessed valuation, again, this is as of January 2018, so this is the same number that was reported last time, still kind of hovering, bless you, around 19 to 81%, give or take, bless you. The commercial permits, 55 through the middle of this year. That's about on, I think last year was at 56 halfway through. So again, on track for last year. I don't know of enough in the pipeline that, again, is going to hit that record-setting year, but I think it should be a good year nonetheless. So new commercial square footage, just about 350,000 square feet so far built in the first half of the year, which is good, because if you recall the last time I spoke to y'all, we're really at a lack when it comes to existing inventory. We're continuing to see projects come before us that are looking for existing space, and right now we just cannot meet those needs. So it sounds like while we're probably not going to necessarily see any spec space, I think we are starting to see some active marketing for new construction. So once a lead tenant would come into one of those buildings, then hopefully that'll allow for the construction of additional space. So we have 2 or 3 projects right now, all looking at doing some office, and with that would create some vacancy. So this is the numbers again. That's really very telling on the existing and available. We're below 10% for office, below 10% for retail, and hovering right around 10% for industrial. So really, anytime you start seeing numbers that low, typically would result in the construction of speculative space, but we're not seeing that this time. Everything is still sort of build to suit. Hopefully, the vacancy rates region-wide will start to shrink up, and we will see some speculative space be constructed. Because again, right now, just the trend in the market is people want existing space. So it does make it very tough to recruit new business without that space. Unemployment rates as of May, these are record lows. I guess probably in the last 10 years, we're still hovering around 2.9%. The MSA is at 3%. Virginia as a whole is at 2.9%. So unemployment numbers, don't see anything really there that's going to change that for the worse. Hopefully they'll continue to shrink up a little bit more. Employment growth, again, this is an annual number, so this is the same as it was at the end of last year, but we've created almost 4,500 jobs in the last 5 years here. giving Goochland the highest job growth percentage rate in the Commonwealth. Business licenses, again, this number stays kind of flat year over year. Total licenses on the books is 2,314. I think last time at the strategic planning session, I kept referencing 1,600. Those are 1,600 active fee-paying business licenses. The delta there is somebody that may be a home-based occupation or somebody that has maybe a consulting firm where they're not generating any revenue. So while there's actually 2,300 active business licenses, they may not all be actively pursuing business. So that brings me to the strategic planning. Obviously, we had our joint meeting on the 27th, and if you recall, that was a kind of a three-step project. Phase one, the data collection has been going on in earnest over the last year. The EDA conducted a SWOT analysis, stakeholder interviews, you all had the interviews as well, statistics and demographic consolidation. All of that data then fed into the joint meeting that was held on the 27th. And that was between the Economic Development Authority and then the Board of Supervisors, obviously, with some staff as well as some stakeholders from the community. So the next step will be drafting that plan and then adopting the plan later this fall. So the meeting, obviously you were there, so this is more information for everybody else, but we kind of broke a lot of the feedback into a couple different categories, one of which being existing business, which was the sustainability of the development. We talked about the business visitations, talked about how to sustain, how to grow, and how to understand the current business climate. So that was the first identified area to focus on. The second one being attracting new business. So obviously attracting new capital investment, aligning the market trends with Mr. Peterson's emphasis on taxable, and then the marketing efforts to go along with that. And if you recall, these are kind of the three legs of the economic development stool. And then we talked about tourism, which will be a new avenue for the county to pursue. Obviously, there's existing tourism in the county now, but it's never really been identified to go after as part of an economic development effort. So in that meeting, we talked about identifying the cluster areas, history, outdoor activities, sports, the horticulture, breweries, gateways, et cetera. Defining our existing inventory assets, creating a database. Agritourism came up in multiple areas, whether it was tourism, new business, existing business. Obviously, agritourism, agriculture plays a large part of our economy here in the county, and building on that in the future, I think, will pay dividends. And again, creating marketing material, tour guides, maps, et cetera. And then citizen involvement. Obviously, it's very important to everybody to have the citizens involved in this process. So things we also talked about, things we want to see in the county, obviously job creation at the top of that list, business culture that supports retention and expansion, flexibility for businesses to adjust to the current marketplace. Obviously things change on a daily basis, and being nimble and being able to adjust for those changes. A customer-friendly, customer-focused employees, always finding a way to say yes. But the balance of the tax base between commercial and residential, diverse products for business investment, offices, certified sites. Again, this kind of goes back to we need to have more diversity in what we can offer. Right now we have a lot of trees and a lot of raw land. That certainly is a benefit in some cases, but in other areas when folks are looking for existing facilities, we don't have the inventory. Diversified businesses. Again, a solid economy is based on a multitude of different types of businesses and not being over-reliant on one industry sector. So diversifying our existing businesses will just create a more sustainable economy long-term. Water, wastewater expansion and planning, and executive roundtables, bringing together the business community for meetings to fill them in with what's going on in the county. Obviously, transportation, Uber and Lyft were mentioned, and then obviously broadband expansion. That's important not only to business, but the residents of the community as well. Things that was mentioned that we don't want to see. Loss of protected rural areas kept coming up to the top. Don't want to see businesses leaving the county. Do not want to see the government competing with the private sector. Unnecessary government restrictions, disastrous developments. Example of the 6th Street Market was mentioned. The Redskins training facility, I believe, was thrown out there amongst others. And then harassment mentality of employees. So again, the next steps, this was kind of a 3-step process. The first step, or the next step, will be preparing a draft update. That would then be taken to the EDA for their approval. Then it would come to you for approval with a final adoption either the end of summer or fall of 2018. And with that, that is the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on any of that information.
Okay, any questions for Matt? Yep, Mr. Minnick.
Just a few.
Sure.
Easy one.
Sure.
So, everybody that pings our website, either your website or the county website, are we able to reach back to them with some sort of email traffic or hard copy traffic? Do we know who they are?
Yes
Do we
and no.
capture-
So all I can really speak for is on the economic development website, I utilize the analytic tools. So I can go in and track and see where visits are coming from. I can kind of break that down to geographic region, can drill down to state, locality. So typically what I've been doing in the past is, if I see a lot of time spent from a certain area, then I may go, pull the newspaper from that area and see what's going on in their business climate, who's looking to move. And at that point, then it's a lot of just cold calling. Occasionally we'll send out just marketing packages, but there's not necessarily a way, necessarily to automatically. It's more of a, I guess, having to go in and do it manually, if you will. There certainly probably could be something set up if somebody were to. You could sign up on the website to an RSS feed where you get updates. But as far as a direct response, there's nothing currently. But that's not to say that it couldn't be done in the future.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've noticed an increase in activity that I'm getting as a result of hitting a website, either consumer or tourism or something like that. So I'm wondering if we can take advantage of it. And in many cases, it's followed by a piece of, hard copy mail.
So you could do Google ads. There's different ways you could capture that. A lot of times, I think it depends on which data is collected when you go to the website, is kind of how that works. And there's all kinds of things
Right.
where
There's
there's
some-
heat mapping capabilities now where you can go in and you can see who's clicked on what on the website, where it's come from. So there certainly are opportunities there. I have not explored all of those, but I do think that there certainly is potential to increase that moving forward. Everything seems to be going online these days. Obviously, it's kind of a broken record to even say that out loud, but I think investing in that and following that is certainly is a good option.
Other questions or comments? Matt, I can't thank you enough for all you've done, and a lot of these charts kind of took off vertical when you arrived, so I'm guessing you're taking full credit for all of that.
Not today, but once I leave, yes.
Yeah.
As a direct result of my hard work and my hard work only. So
But I'm sure you played a role, and for that role, I want to just thank you so much for all you've done for the county, and
thank you.
Wish you all the best going forward.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here, and again, I couldn't have done it without your support, so
Stay in touch.
thank you all.
Good,
I will.
thank you.
Give us your
Thank you,
email
Matt.
when you get.
Okay, next item is appointments. I believe we've got a few appointments to make.
Yes, sir.
That's what I thought you said. Page 69. There we go. Okay. Here's page 69 of your packet. The first, well, here, we can either consider them as a group or take them individually. Is any thoughts on the board? Take them as a group is
Group is
fine?
good.
Okay, group is fine. You can see all the names there, the Capillary Alcohol, Eddie Carpenter, Social Services Board, Glenda Lebo, the Central Virginia Waste Management Authority, Lee Dunn, Dwayne Jones, Goodson Powhatan Community Services Board, Elizabeth Lyda. Any comments or questions on any of these individuals have all indicated their willingness to serve? Okay, great. All right, well, if there's no other comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept all the appointments as read by our chairman.
Okay, so the motion is to make the appointments as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Okay, it's unanimous. Those appointments are made. Thank you very much. That pretty much concludes our afternoon session. There's no closed meeting today, so we will break for a dinner break and come back together at 7 p.m. this evening for our public hearings. Unless there's anything else to come before this body, then we are officially on a break. Thank you. July 3rd, 2018. First item on the agenda for this evening is a citizen comment period. During the citizen comment period, anyone who wishes to come forward and speak to this group on any item of Goochland County business is welcome to do so. If you're, just as a reminder, if you are here tonight to speak about one of the items that's scheduled for a public hearing, the citizen comment period is not the time to do that. The time to do that would be at the time of the public hearing you wish to speak about. There will be an open session there as well. So this is for anything that's not on the agenda for this evening. At this point, I'll go ahead and open up the citizen comment period. Anyone would like to come forward? Now would be the time. Seeing none. I don't.
Do you see anybody?
And as you come forward, I'll just ask you to remind you to give us your name and address and keep your remarks to about 3 minutes.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Jonathan Lau, 1521 Mannequin Road. I am the Managing Director of Highway Information Media, which is a partner with Virginia Tourism and Virginia Department of Transportation. And for the last several years, we have been working to promote tourism in the Commonwealth. And Mr. Ryan's economic development presentation I thought was really well done at the 3 o'clock meeting. Those of you who weren't here for that, it's your loss in my opinion. But he touched on tourism as one of the opportunities, but I would caution against, I guess, what was called once irrational exuberance about tourism. I've been knocking around for about 10 or 12 years in the tourism industry, and I can tell you that there are some Hindenburgs out there. I mean, one was mentioned, the 6th Street Marketplace. And based on some numbers that I was looking at, I would say in 2019, 2020, at best, tourism would probably add maybe $200,000 in net revenue to the county. And I'm saying tourism because that's different from travel. I'm sure all of you are acquainted with Claire Gunn, who wrote the epic 101 travel industry travel planning. And in there, the textbook definition is tourism is the temporary movement of people to destinations outside their normal place of work and residence, the activities undertaken during their stay at those destinations, and the facilities created to cater to their needs. In English, that is, tourism is a voluntary overnight stay or visitors who have traveled more than 50 miles for a specific event, a meal, purchase, recreational, educational experience. So tourism is not travel. Tourism is a subsection of travel. Travel is wise. It's Exxon now. It used to be Texaco. People buying gas. That's travel. But when it's voluntary and people have initiated the travel, now you're starting to talk about tourism. So in Virginia, tourism is $25 billion. Whoops. Sandy gave me her 3 minutes. The United States Travel Association said in Goochland right now, there are about, as I think they report, 230 travel-related jobs. And there's approximately $460,000 in travel, not tourism, travel-related tax revenue that the county is getting. So there's a great upside there, but as it comes back to what Mr. Gunn says, you need to have facilities and you need to make investments as to what's going to go on. I've mentioned that there are a lot of Hindenburgs out there, a lot of people. Louisa County closed their visitor center about 4 years ago, and they were spending about $15,000 a year. Didn't see an ROI on that. When I sat down and looked at, I guess it's the Residence Inn that's going in, 130 rooms, I guesstimate $115 a night, 80% occupancy. That was going to throw off about $43,000 in the 1% sales tax that the county will get. And then if the current TOT, transient occupancy tax at 2%, you're going to get another $87,000. That's if they hit 80% occupancy and they have $115 a night. And that really is the primary source most tourism revenues come from, is from hotel occupancy. Now, you throw in some of the sales tax from places like Hardywood or from Raskowitz or Field Day of the Past, you need a benchmark. You need a base. What are we currently getting from it? So my recommendation is don't invest money in tourism until you got a champion who's going to be accountable, because if it's everybody's job, nobody's responsible. So you need somebody not to be sort of drill sergeant about it, but somebody has to be accountable for what kind of revenues. And if the county, and I hope you don't, increase the temporary or transient occupancy tax, because you can go up to 5, because once you go over 2, all that money has to be directed towards tourism. Well, before you start spending money on something, please know what you're trying to do. Is it visitors? Is it likes on Facebook? Is it reviews on TripAdvisor? Is it sales tax revenue? Know what you're trying to achieve before you start putting money into it. And then finally, what we've seen, it's a lot easier to get people to do more of what they're doing than to create a new activity. So if people are already coming to breweries or wineries or horse shows, encouraging additional activity there is going to be a whole lot easier than putting in a hot air balloon emporium or some other type of activity that may make sense, but it's not what people currently are thinking about and are currently doing. People will tell you what they want to do with their wallet. Where they're spending their money is where they'll continue to spend money. If you make it a good experience for them, they'll come back and they'll start doing more of it. I'm enthused that the county is looking at tourism. It is not turn on the spigot and watch the money come out. There is a lot of work behind it. Mr. Ryan has done a really good job, I think, focusing where the biggest returns are, because that's what I'll call economic development. But agritourism, agricultural businesses, and tourism are all part of that mix, but please do not increase the TOT and say, hey, we got this money now, what do we do with it? I would rather you say, we've got a plan, and this is what it's going to take to achieve it, and here's the funding we need to do it. Does that make sense, or are we better off putting the money into some kind of business recruitment program? As much as I love tourism, it's a business. If somebody wants to do it on their own, private industry should not be looking to the county to do all their marketing. They're in this for business. They're in it to make a nickel or two. And if there's something the county can do in concert, man, I'm all for it. I'll be the biggest cheerleader you've seen. But I am really hesitant about seeing the board pursue. We're going to increase a tax. We're going to create a bucket of money, and now we're going to go see what we can do with it. I would much rather see the county say, we've got a plan, this is what we'd like to do, and here's how we can fund it, because for every dollar we put in, we're going to get 8 back, or 5, or 4. But it's got to be a 1+ environment, in my opinion, for it to make sense. It hasn't gone red yet, has it?
Yes.
It did once.
Maybe I'm on my third minute. So I'm thrilled. I'm sorry to see Mr. Ryan leave. I think he's really done a great job for the county. In fact, I know he has, because my real estate rate, thanks to your sage oversight, has stayed at 53 cents per 100. And that's great. But tourism is a great opportunity. It is not, it's not 7 beans I got from trading a cow and I'm going to grow a beanstalk. I mean, it's not magic. But it does have opportunity, and to the degree that I could be of any assistance in 3.7 minutes, I'd be happy to do so. And I'll sit down now.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lau, for those thoughtful words. We appreciate that. Anyone else like to come forward? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the citizen comment period. Okay, next are the public hearings for this evening. I think we've got a total of 9 scheduled. For those that may or may not be familiar with the process that we'll go through this evening, first the staff will present the applications to the board. Second, if there's an applicant or representative here for each of the items, they'll be given an opportunity to speak. Then we'll open it up to the public hearing, and citizens or anyone from the public that wants to approach can speak to the item. And then the applicant may or may not be given an opportunity to respond. And then the Board of Supervisors will consider the application and perhaps ask additional questions before we render some kind of a decision. So that's the process we'll go through tonight generally. The first item, I believe, Ms. Hunter, you're going to present the first item for consideration tonight?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. Joanne Hunter, Director of Community Development. The first public hearing this evening is a conditional use permit submitted by Andrew Smith. This is a request for two different CUPs. The first one is to renew auto sales and service CUP that was issued in 2007, and to also add a new use for the site for farm equipment sales and service. Property is located in the Oilville Village on Broad Street. The comprehensive plan designates the property single-family residential. Even though the comp plan designates it for residential, the property is zoned. It's sort of an odd-shaped, Z-shaped parcel, and you can see it does wrap a residential neighborhood. That's Autumn Breeze, which is zoned R1. The property is two smaller buildings, and then it has lots of open area in the back that wraps around the residential area, but the predominant commercial activity occurs on the Broad Street frontage. So when we were working through this case, there were three enforcement concerns. Glad to say that they all have been addressed as of about noon today when we went out and inspected it, but I do want to just review them just for the history of the case. So there was three concerns: compliance with the 2007 CUP, the farm equipment sales were occurring without the CUP, and whether the repairs were being adequately screened, and there was also trash and debris on site. So when we went to inspect the property, when he had applied for his renewal, we found out that he was not fully in compliance with his site plan that was approved for the property. They had not installed all the landscaping, and they had not striped the parking lot. Both of those items have been completed. This case was actually deferred between the Planning Commission and the board meeting for 60 days to allow the applicant to sort of bring this into compliance prior to coming to the board. So you can see the property is paved and striped there. You can also see this is where they are storing their trailer equipments. With the farm equipments, he works on a lot of horse trailers and that type of activity. So when we did go out and see the site, we did notice that they were doing the farm equipment and trailer equipment, so he had to get a conditional use permit for all that also. So also there's concerns of where he's working on the repair activities for the trailers. The trailers do not fit inside the building, so he would need to screen the area of where he's going to work on the vehicles. With approval of this CUP and adherence to the CUP conditions that we propose, this would have resolved this violation also. So this is a sample of the site plan. You can see the building, Broad Street is up top, and this is where they would be working on the buildings, and we are recommending either fencing or landscaping to screen the vehicle repairs from Broad Street. The third concern was that there were stockpiles of construction debris and junk on the property, and as of today, we went out and inspected it, and that has been entirely cleaned up, and the violation is abated. So we do want to thank Mr. Swift for taking care of all this before it got to the Board of Supervisors. They did have a community meeting back on January 25th. 3 citizens attended the meeting. Discussions were talking about the not being in compliance with the previous CUP and the outdoor storage on the site. No concerns were expressed by the citizens, and they were supportive of this business at this location. The Planning Commission did approve this request on April 5th, and no one spoke at the public hearing. So you're going to see two different things. So the white strike through are the changes from the cut from the 2007 to this new CUP. And you will see on your dais in front of you is there are new conditions that were changed based on him coming into compliance with the site. And those are shown on the screen on yellow. If you do take action tonight, we would recommend that you do it with these amended conditions as shown, handed out tonight and on the screen. So I'll quickly review the conditions. Plan of development, improvements shall conform to the POD. The previous conditions talking about installing them. Since he's installed all them, we're now saying that those conditions, those improvements just need to be maintained. Vehicles and equipment for sale shall be parked on paved or gravel areas as shown on the POD. This is new, the yellow language. Trailers under repair or waiting to be repaired shall be parked in a designated area that is adequately screened as defined in the zoning ordinance, and the designated area and screening shall be installed within 60 days of the CUP approval, and they would also need to have a sign showing where those designated areas are. Second condition is that the vehicles would be stored in that adequately screened area and that no more than 8 trailers can be parked on the site. Lighting, if he adds any lighting, it needs to be dark sky compliant and a lighting plan would be required. Commercial entrance is required, it's there, he just has to maintain it. Hours of operation, and these are all part of the 2007 CUP. The applicant did not ask for any changes to conditions 5 through 8. So he's open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. They're closed on Sunday. Properties in the overlay district and must be in compliance with that. We are recommending, the previous permit was for 10 years. Because there were violations on the site, we are recommending a 5-year condition with that. That's that's consistent with our CUP extension policy. Whenever there's violations, we try to just give it a 5-year time limit to see if the applicant continues to stay in conformance with the conditions. And then we have our standard transfer of ownership condition. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Ms. Hunter? Not at this point. Thank you much. Okay. Is the applicant here this evening?
Yes.
Would the applicant like to come forward and make a comment?
The only comment I have, I'd like to get back to the planning commission on the screening.
Well, if you have a comment, if you could please come forward, I'd appreciate it. And then when you get to the microphone, if you could just give us your name and address for the record, that would be great. I'd really appreciate it. You take all the time you need.
My name is Andrew Swift. I live at 880 Three Chop Road, Mannequin Sabbath. Ms. Hunter, we'll get back to the screening, and I'd like to go over with you if I could. I'd like to. Could you show me where you want the screening on the fencing?
Oh, on the picture.
Yes, please.
Just a minute, we're getting there.
There we go. Right there
And you
is.
can, if you want to point, you can push
Well,
that button.
I'm not very good at electronics anyway. Where they're talking about a 6-foot fence or some type of screening there, right at that part, we wanted to probably put farm machinery or something for sale where it could be seen. I'd like to put the screening back further and a little bit on the side, and I'd like to show, when you get a chance to meet with you, and see if we couldn't change that. Other than that, I have no other questions or comments either.
Okay, if you could, do we have anybody have any questions for the applicant at this point?
Yeah, maybe a clarification. So you're saying that maybe I'll point here, that you want this further back?
No, sir. See, please put your hand back here for me. Okay, come on down a little bit more, little bit more.
Oh.
And then go right straight across. I'd like to have that screening right there, up to about 6 feet, with lattice instead of straight up boards. Going down the road at 55 miles an hour, you might see the lattice, but you're not going to be able to see completely through it. If you're standing there, you can, as you know.
Sure.
And I think it would look a whole lot better than a board fence going right straight up. And plus, I'm worried about people. Some of these people got some $100,000 trailers, and I'm worried about people breaking into them. So I don't, I'd like to get it as simple as possible, and yet have as much outside storage for sale, resale, new and used, as we can get there.
Okay, so the purpose, the screening would be for the vehicles that are awaiting repair?
Waiting to be repaired, or being on one side, I'd like to have some screening where they can be repaired without anybody seeing, and no trespassing signs put on it. Not unless you walk up and you walk through that hole, you can see it.
And if we were to set back from Broad Street, set back that screen that far to where he was indicating,
Yes, sir.
is that going to give you enough room back there for all the ones awaiting repair?
Well, I don't think he's gonna have, but about one or two big trailers waiting repairs. Small trailers we can put sometimes behind the building or something like that. How big is, his biggest, I rent the building.
Okay,
His biggest concern are gooseneck trailers, which at this point, he's new in this business, he hasn't been able to get enough money to get machines to bring those goosenecks and move them around. But he's working on that. But I'd like to be able to work with the planning commission and see if we can rectify that. Well, both of us be happy, all of us be happy.
so if the intent of the screen is to screen vehicles awaiting repair and not necessarily meant to screen vehicles for sale,
For sale or use or new.
so you don't have an issue with the screening for the ones awaiting repair?
No, sir.
It's just a matter of how much space you want dedicated toward what's waiting for repair, and then perhaps the materials as well. Now, I believe the way this is written is just in compliance with our ordinance on what screening is acceptable, and I don't believe there's just one option. There may be more than one option, but it would need to be compliant with the county ordinance. But you wouldn't have any problem with that either?
I don't think so.
Okay. Just, this is just clarification, just trying to understand.
Yes, sir.
Not trying to lead you in one direction or the other, just wanted to understand.
Right.
Okay, other questions or clarifications for the applicant at this point?
No, I'm back to Joanne.
Yeah, I think so. Well, perhaps, maybe to save you the long trip, maybe you could just sit up front for just a second and then,
We
in
may be
case we
calling
need,
you back.
in case we need to call you again, I don't hate to inconvenience you too much. The seats are all the same price here tonight, so.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chair, yeah, if I can, if I just, so I'm not sure I understand exactly.
following you.
So the screening is not an I think so. It's a yes or no. I mean, it's in the code as a
Shall.
requirement,
Yes.
so.
Correct.
So I'm not sure what's trying to be achieved exactly. I'm sensitive to it, but I'm not trying, I don't understand exactly what's trying to be achieved, because if we're screening the repair or waiting to repair vehicles, but now we could potentially have waiting to repair trailers or whatever in front of the screening, because there's not enough space to store inside of the screen. I'm not sure I'm exactly following Mr. Swift just yet what's going on.
He's talking about equipment for sale.
Yes.
Yeah, he's talking about the.
That's not repair.
Yeah, I think the indication was you wanted vehicles for sale to be able to be seen by folks traveling by.
Sure.
I guess one of the concerns you might have is if you take in a trailer that's in need of repair and you
Put it in the
put it for sale rather than fix it. So you could try to sell a vehicle rather than fix it, just put that up for sale. Well, what's the difference between a vehicle that's in disrepair that's for sale versus a vehicle that's in disrepair awaiting repair? You see where that's a,
Mr. Peterson, if I may, the
Sure.
proffered, the conditions as written say if it's a vehicle or equipment to be repaired, under repair, or waiting to repaired, they're all required to be screened. And nothing gives them an absolute right to put something for sale in front of screening. So if it was both for sale and needing repair, it'd have to be behind the fence, but based on these conditions. I believe, Ms. Hunter, unless you think that's differently, but that's the way I read it.
so if it's in need of repair but being sold as is,
I mean, if it is waiting to be repaired, or under repair, all of those verbs say it has to be screened.
okay.
And he has no absolute right to put
Right.
things for sale in view. So the conditions would say, that's got to be screened, we don't care if you're selling it or not. That's the way I would read that.
I don't think that doesn't sound right to me.
Well, yeah, Ms. Hunter, would you like to weigh in?
Sorry to interrupt.
Right.
So the reason why this condition was based on it is that the trailers do not fit in the building. So most of the repairs were occurring outside. So that was where the genesis of this condition came from. We do not, this is illustrative, because this is where, if you can see in the pictures, this is where a lot of the trailers are being worked on. If you look at the pictures, you can see that's where a lot of them are worked on. The conditions don't require the fencing or the landscape screening in that area, but that is where it is occurring right now. There's a couple different options. I think Mr. Swift said going back to the Planning Commission, the board could request to defer this or based on the applicant's request, and we can continue to work with Mr. Swift on this. But however, the conditions do not require the screening in this location. It just requires that wherever he decides to do it on site, it has to be screened. So I hope that might clear it up.
It does. So if he decides to get out of the trailer repair business, he doesn't need a screen at all. If he
Right.
wants to use that entire area for it, then it would need to be screened in accordance with our ordinance. Okay.
Okay.
No, that is helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Questions from
Oh,
Ms.
yeah.
Hunter? Oh, yeah.
So
I want to sit down.
maybe one more question. So if we approve this tonight as presented, they can work with you on where to put that screen based on,
Where they're going to
Is
do
that-
work.
Yeah, it would have to be just
So it's like
consistent with our
as part of the
ordinance,
POD
yes.
or? Okay.
So we're not approving a type of fence or a location of fencing or screening?
That would all be done through staff and
That's
the
all done through
POD.
staff.
So the code section that's referenced in the condition gives you a couple different options. It can be an opaque fence, it could be dense evergreen shrubs. There's a variety of things that you can pick and choose, so,
And we're not deciding that tonight, so.
no.
Okay.
And we would leave that up to the applicant as long as they met one of those requirements.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for that. I appreciate
Mm-hmm.
that. Ms. Lasclet, did you have something else?
I do. I'm still a little bit confused. So, a Broad Street, that line,
Is up
yes,
here. This is
that's
Broad.
Broad Street.
Mhm.
So, we're talking about screening along Broad Street and both sides. And why are we screening on the sides?
Because of the visibility as
To
you're
what?
driving on Broad. And the code does require, the code really requires you to do all your repairs indoors or behind the building. Because he's not able to do that, we're giving him the option of having it outdoors with being screened.
Okay.
Because he's doing the repairs outside.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, follow up. So,
Sure.
along Broad Street, where the screening has to occur, because we're hiding or screening out the repair, are you saying that he could put vehicles for sale in front of that, between the screening and Broad Street?
He could, yes.
Okay.
And again,
That's-
just point out that the screening does not need to be here. If he decides to do the repairs or the storage somewhere else, this is not necessarily where the screening needs to be.
Gotcha.
This is just where he is doing it right now. So if he decides to have it somewhere else on site, we can be happy to work with him on what needs to be screened.
Okay.
So repairs take place indoors, for sale takes place outdoors. This is kind of a compromise to say, okay, if you want to do repairs outdoors, we got to create an indoor type environment outside, but it's up to him where and how. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So,
Okay, I
Mr.
can do
Chairman, I
that.
have
Yes, sir.
another question. Ms. Hunter, what is the screening on this side doing? Is that another property?
See, that's what I'm
Yeah, it's
asking.
let me go to the aerial photo. It's actually a residence.
Oh, okay,
If I can get to the aerial photo, I'm sorry. But there you see,
yeah.
there's a residence.
Could you please approach? Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Making
Shorter
him
trip this time.
exercise.
Shorter trip this time.
I also own that piece of property next door, but I think what and I believe the way I interpret it, is they wanted screening for 250. If you were coming down
Right.
250, you can probably see the side of the building where some of that is being repaired. I'd like to show the planning commission what I recommend. I think it'll look better than that fence. But anyway, I'm sure we can come to some compromise on it, but I've got an idea how we can eliminate that also.
Mr.
but I'll
Swift,
be glad to show.
when you said you wanted to show, did you mean this group of people right
I
here?
don't have it with me, I'm
That-
sorry.
no,
I
no.
was talking with the planning commission, I'm sorry.
Right, no, that's okay. That's a
Planning department.
board you appeared before earlier, but you're
Uh-huh.
before the board now. Do you mean you'd like to show the board, or you're asking to go back to the planning commission?
I'm asking to work with the planning commission to show.
I think it's the planning department he
Yeah,
might be
I
working
think-
with.
More
okay.
planning department.
Okay.
It's
Very good.
Joanne and
Joanne.
her folks, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Hunter, I have another question for you. You don't have to get up. What are the screening requirements for the business next door?
Business to business does not need to be screened. So
But do
that,
can they have unrepaired cars in the front?
they can't do any repairs outside.
Okay, so it's behind that fence, they have a fence there and,
Yes.
Indoors. Just not doing the big trailer type stuff.
right, well, they do sometimes have, but it's another case for another day, I guess. Okay,
Other,
Mr. Chairman?
yes,
I
ma'am.
just wanted to remind you that we hadn't yet invited other members of the public
Right.
to speak. You may well be keeping track of that, but I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page.
Good, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant or Ms. Hunter at this point? Okay. All right. I will go ahead at this point and open up the public hearing. Anyone that would like to come forward and speak on this particular public hearing, now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, any additional discussion on this one, or clarification or questions?
No, it's my understanding that
Mine would just be to give us some clarification. If and when a board member makes a motion on this one, we had the original approval that was modified in our board packet, which was further modified by a resolution that was placed at our, so what would the wording be for a proper motion?
You can simply do it as amended. What Ms. Hunter was showing you in her PowerPoint was how it had changed from the CUP you last approved. And then the yellow was something that had changed since the Planning Commission, something that's not in your packet. But as amended would be indicative of how it was presented tonight.
Okay, so just simply as amended and,
discussed.
and that resolution was handed out so that we, okay. All right. Any additional discussion on the board? We're all clear on what's before us? Okay. All right, well then, if that's the case, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I move we approve the amended resolution concerning the conditional use application 2007-00015 alpha by Mr. Swift as presented this evening.
As amended and presented.
Second.
Okay. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution as amended. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins.
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette.
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Okay, you have your approval. It was unanimous. The resolution's approved. Thank you. All right, best of luck. Thank you, Ms. Hunter, and I think you're up again for the next one.
Yes, sir. Give me 1 minute to get to it, please. The second public hearing tonight is a ordinance amendment. It's a countywide ordinance amendment dealing with transient occupancy. There we go. The purpose of this ordinance is to clarify and address how and where transient lodging shall be permitted in the county. The ordinance would only impact transient lodging, which is considered 30 days or less. We would not, with this ordinance, be regulating or prohibiting anybody from having a roommate or any other long-term rental situation. So the county has previously, seems like we've been talking about short-term rentals and bed and breakfast for a long time. Yes. So I think it started about 2 summers ago when we started talking about, we had our first short-term rental in the county. We tried to see how it fit best into the code, and that was similar to a bed and breakfast use. So we were calling them bed and breakfast uses, which were CUP uses in the agricultural district. So we've seen more and more interest in short-term rentals. What these are is they're booking sites where it's part of the sharing economy where a homeowner can either rent out their room or their entire house for fewer than 30 days to transient lodgers. They can be through like a week or a weekend, and there's a variety of websites, Airbnb, HomeAway, Flip, VRBO, those sorts of things. So we were calling these short-term rentals bed and breakfast, and that seemed to be confusing people because people were saying, well, they don't provide breakfast, they don't do this, they don't do that. And then as we were going through our ordinance, we found another reference towards transient lodging, and that was in our home occupation ordinance that had the rental of rooms to tourists. So we came back to amend that, and the board rightfully said, you know, we're doing a lot of Band-Aids, let's stop and look at transient lodging as a comprehensive way. So that's what we started to do. So staff did a lot of research. We also used a document that was prepared by the Richmond Regional, which pulled a lot of different localities' ordinances together and figured out how we could make it Goochlandized. So what we did is there's 4 different components to the ordinance. I'm going to review each one and then stop after each section for questions at that point. So what this ordinance does is it provides the new definitions for transient uses. It establishes in which districts these uses are permitted. Some are going to be proposed as by right uses with development standards, and others are going to be CUPs. The ones that have development standards, by right uses are going to have development standards, and then also we have a registration process. So the first part I want to cover is the definitions. So in our code right now, we already had 2 existing definitions for dealing with transient lodging, the bed and breakfast and the hotel. We are proposing changes to both of these. So the bed and breakfast, we are now making that definition as a owner-occupied dwelling, which means the owner has to live in the dwelling, has to be their principal dwelling, where a portion is used for sleeping or lodging for transient renters, which is a rental for less than 30 days, and the occupancy is limited to 10 people total. Providing meals may be included as an accessory use. So you can provide meals, you're not required. 10 is a critical number. You're going to see that throughout this ordinance. That's based on the building code. Whenever you go over 10 people, you are no longer allowed to do it in a residential structure. It becomes a hotel, and you have to have much higher building standards and fire standards, things like that. So that's the bed and breakfast. Again, key point is that you have to be owner occupied, and you can either it's a portion of your home. You're not renting out your entire house while you go somewhere else. So a hotel, we're making that a definition much simpler. It's just basically a facility which permitted occupancy of 10 or more, which offers accommodations for transient lodging. So then we have 2 new terms that we'll be introducing to the code, the short-term rental hosted and the short-term rental on-hosted. So these are more of your Airbnb, those type of facilities. We did, as we looked through there, that many localities treat the ones that are hosted versus the ones that are on-hosted very differently. So there's a different standard there in terms of keeping an eye on the property, noise levels, that sorts of things. So a short-term rental would be an owner-occupied dwelling. Again, you'd have to live there, and you'd be only allowed to rent out a portion of your home, and it's limited to the number of residents that's approved by the septic system, but you cannot exceed 10 people total. The on-hosted is completely different. That is a dwelling where a portion of or the entire dwelling is used for sleeping, and it's rented for 30 days. Again, same thing with the number of people limited to 10. So the on-hosted, it's when someone's renting the entire house, nobody's living there, there's no oversight. Short-term rental hosted, you're living there, they're only in a room of your house, and you're providing oversight. So before I go into where these are going to be proposed in the zoning ordinance, does anybody have any questions on the definitions?
Questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Couple real quick.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. And I know I've looked at this and thought about it over and over, but now there's a couple things that come to mind. On
Okay.
the previous slide, okay, so a bed and breakfast limited to 10 people, so they could have 10 and be a bed and breakfast.
Yes.
Okay, a hotel occupancy, so 10 could also be a hotel,
10 or more is a hotel.
right? So if you have 10,
So 10 is that critical number.
Right.
You're below 10, you're not a hotel, you're still, like, under the building code, considered a residential use. Once you have over 10 people lodging, you are considered a hotel because you have to have higher development, higher
But you-
building code standards.
right? And I understand the distinction, but it says under bed and breakfast that they can have 10. It says, I think it should be under hotel more than 10.
More than 10.
She's saying that at 10, it fits in both
Right.
definitions.
Both categories.
We can,
I don't remember under the building code whether it's,
I think it's
I never caught that before.
limited to 10 people total,
so a hotel would be more than 10.
more than 10.
Okay.
We can correct that. Can you make a note of that?
Okay, and then on, excuse me, one more question.
Sure, go right ahead.
All right, on the next slide, the, okay, so short-term rental, what's the difference between a short-term rental, owner-occupied, stay overnight, shall not exceed 10. So what's the difference between a short-term rental hosted and a bed and breakfast?
There's no difference, and we've talked about calling them the same thing. However, there was always confusions when, there, people who have a bed and breakfast are very clear that they have a bed and breakfast, they're not a short-term rental.
Right.
So it's more of, it's the same
Okay.
definition, but it's just
Okay.
keeping it clear because people have different understandings of what they are.
That's fine.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
a Question for clarification. The 10 people, does that include the host?
Yes. So it's, if you have 2 people living in the house, and you can only rent to 8 more people.
Okay.
Ooh. Good question.
And if it's unhosted, then 10, okay.
Yes.
So they can leave.
So it says 10 people total, so it's, total of all the people
Okay.
staying, but, okay.
All right, so those are the definitions. Now I'm going to go into where those different uses can occur. So the slide on the chart on the left-hand side in red, that's our existing ordinance, and the slide on the right in green is where we're proposing. So not only are we clarifying where we can do these uses, but we're also expanding where you can do transient occupancy in the county. So right now, the only place you could do it previously was in the A1 and A2 districts, and it required a CUP. We had this term bed and breakfast and country inns. Country inns was not defined in the ordinance at all, so we've just eliminated that. So what we're proposing, and this is very important, so by right, in the A1 and A2, we're saying you could have a short-term rental hosted if you meet certain development standards. So that means if you live in the dwelling and you're only renting out a portion of it and you meet the development standards that I'm going to review in the next couple slides, you can do that by right without having to come to any public board. You'd have to come to the county and register. But no legislative decision. Same for a bed and breakfast. Again, that's bed and breakfast. The key thing is, again, it's owner occupied and you're only renting out a portion of your home. So those would be by right uses in A1 and A2. With a CUP, if you want to rent out your entire house, move out for 2 weeks and have someone move in, or if you don't live there, you live in another state, and you want to rent out your home, that would be a CUP. Again, that would give the board some opportunity to listen to the citizens if there's concerns, if it's not the right fit in the neighborhood, if there's concerns of noise, that sort of thing. Because these can be high-impact uses when they're unhosted. Also, because we had the term country inn, we've changed that to hotel. So those would be CUP uses in the agricultural district. Now, the big change is in all of our residential districts previously, you could not do any transient lodging. So this would say whether it's short-term rental hosted or unhosted, or a bed and breakfast, you could ask for a CUP for transient lodging, permission to have transient lodging in your home. So that's a big change. That's expands it considerably. These are smaller districts, so it is appropriate to have a public process, be able to let the neighbors know if you're going to do that, and have conditions that may make it more amenable to the district. So any other questions about where we're proposing these uses to be located?
So, Mr. Chair, so
Yeah.
if I understand it correct, in the R designated areas, if it were, I guess even in the A's too, if it were also permitted by an already existing HOA, correct? I mean, the HOA would also have to allow,
Yes, so the county does not regulate the HOA, but
Right.
many many
HOs,
homeowners, covenants may have
Yeah.
it. So if it's not regulated by, I mean, if it's regulated by the covenants, we wouldn't get involved.
Right.
So if they come and told us it's not allowed, they'd have to work that out.
got it.
Okay, so now I'm going to be referencing these by right, the development standards for by right. So these would be the short-term rental, hosted, and the bed and breakfast. This is when they're owner occupied, you're renting out a portion, and what you could do by right. So you'd have to meet the following standards. One, you'd have to register, and I'm going to go over the registration process in a minute. It has to be owner occupied, so the dwelling must be the owner's primary residence. The owner or a designee shall stay overnight at the dwelling and be able to return to the dwelling within 60 minutes during all transient occupancy. The owner or designee shall be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to respond to and resolve issues and complaint that may result of the transient occupancy. And if they have a designee, they must be 21 years of age. Again, this goes into the occupancy that is limited to what's allowed by the septic system. The maximum can be 10. The property would need to maintain a residential appearance. They would be required to have smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors. No outdoor music is permitted after 11 p.m. No firearms can be discharged on the property. Again, we pulled these from a lot of the concerns that we heard for the two Airbnbs that came through the county where they were renting the whole house. These were concerns that the citizens brought to us. And violations, the property may not be advertised or operated as a short-term rental or bed and breakfast use if violations of any applicable state and local laws or regulations related to the rentals have occurred on more than 3 occasions. So that means if they keep doing something wrong or keep getting complaints, there is a violation clause in there. And that's it for the development standards. I can go into the registration if you don't have any questions about the standards.
Ms.
Mr.
Hunter,
Chair.
I apologize.
I do have a question on the hunting and shooting, and I know this came out of one instance where people were shooting out of the back door, whatever. But what if you have a home on a hunting preserve or in a large piece of land and it's a bed and breakfast and people may come and stay while they're hunting? And this says property.
They can always come and get the CUP instead of doing the by right one.
Okay.
And then if it is a hunting preserve, then there may be hours of operation you want to attach to it and things like that. So, and if you can't, even if you're owner occupied, but you can't meet one of these development standards, you can go through the CUP process.
Yes, go ahead, John.
Quick question, and I'm bringing it up now because you're talking about the development standards. Question I had is on the definitions on page 99. It looks like we've agreed that the definition of hotel, we want to change that to a facility with permitted occupancy of 11 or more. That's from earlier discussion, so I think that's just a minor fix. But I noticed in the definitions, bed and breakfast, 10.1 versus 89.2 short-term rental hosted. The only difference I saw in those definitions was the short-term rental hosted says that occupancy is limited by the number of residents allowed by the septic system permit, but shall not exceed 10 people total. It doesn't say that under bed and breakfast. But both of them are going to be governed by the development standards, and I guess somewhere else, the development standards are going to address the septic capacity.
It's under,
It was in your previous
number
slide.
C.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and so those development standards that you have on the screen, they apply to bed and breakfast?
Yes.
Okay. It might just be better if the definitions are clear. I'm just suggesting, I mean, if both have to comply with the development standards, and development standards address the septic capacity. But again, I think if somebody's just looking at definitions, they say, well, I'm gonna call myself a bed and breakfast so I don't run into any issues with my septic capacity.
We can add that to the bed and breakfast definition.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and then the last part of the code, last part of this ordinance is, again, these are dealing with the ones that are by right. We would want them to come in and register so that we know about them. It says, one, they can't operate unless they are registered. For the registration, it's basically they provide their name, address, phone number. They must give it to us annually, January 1, so that we can keep whoever their designee and their contact information accurate. There'd be no registration fee, and because a lot of these are done online, we're looking at adding just an online form that they can just submit online. They wouldn't even have to come to the county. So that covers it. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one slide. This is part of the state code registration, and this is who is exempt from the registration requirements, and that's directly from the state code. But I'd be happy to answer any questions. That's our comprehensive review of transient lodging.
Yeah. Ms. McGee, did you have something?
I did, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hunter, I apologize, I might have missed it, but is there still a development standard that is transient lodging must occur within the principal dwelling? That's in our board packet. It was listed as number C in the board packet. I thought that got added after the planning commission.
Maybe I missed that in my code. Did we add? Do you
That's what's
remember?
listed in the board packet, and I do remember.
That was something that the planning commission asked us to add, and I'm sorry it didn't make it my slide, so yes.
So the principal dwelling is the name of it, and it says transient occupancy must occur within the principal dwelling. And that was requested by the planning commission, and I wanted to make sure that it matched. It is in your packet that way, and then we'll make sure that it gets.
Ms. McGee,
yeah.
what page in the packet are you referring to now?
That's still on page 98.
Okay.
And it's the development standards, it's the little paragraph, little sentence C. It's the C development
Got it.
standard. So,
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Ms. McGee. That was something that came up to the planning commission. The planning commission was concerned with people would be just going out and adding trailers to their properties and wanted to make sure that it really was contained and part of their residence to kind of keep it small and not get too big. So that was a change we made, and it just didn't make it to the slides. I apologize.
Okay.
So,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, so could that be done with a CUP?
Yes.
So, okay. So if you have like a cabin and you want to be able to rent that, you can come in with a CUP and get it?
Yes.
Just not by
By right.
Chairman?
Yes, sir. Ms. Lumpkins.
On registration requirements, which you last discussed, I have a question about the exemption. And it sounds like registration we've made it very simple and painless process, which is excellent. So I don't expect people who are trying to work around it. But just to be clear, it says no owner or other person shall advertise or operate a short-term rental, et cetera, without registering. And then the following are exempt from the requirements: salespersons and brokers licensed by the real estate board. Is that exemption intended to exempt licensees from having to register their own property that they own?
I'm going to defer to the county attorney's office because this is the legalese that they added to it based on the state code. And
Because where I'm going with this is, if I have one of these, and for some reason I didn't want to register, I could just hire a licensee friend and say, hey, can you advertise for me? And then I can get out from under the registration requirement.
the exemption language, the exemptions are stated in the state code, but I don't recall that the state code had the exact same introductory language we do as an owner or other person advertising. So in other words, that distinction didn't exist under the state code.
I would think of the intent, I'm guessing that, I don't have the state code in front of me, but I'm guessing that the idea is if I'm a real estate agent and I have my own property,
That's correct.
so I don't think our statute is, as it's written, it's not consistent with the or other person language. I think that kind of, if we're exempting salespeople and brokers, we're exempting them from registering. In other words, a non-licensee could get a licensee to advertise the non-licensee's property without registering. And if we don't have to allow that, I'd rather we not.
Well, the critical
state
piece is
code.
in the portion where we're saying no owner or other person shall advertise, we of course are trying to capture the owner who's rented, that someone else is either managing the property for them,
Right.
or so forth. And so we want to make sure that could certainly be changed, that the property shall not be advertised or operated without, and then we've taken off the owner or other person. Would that straighten it out for you?
I just, again, I want to make sure that what the don't want to make the exemption broader than the state law requires. And if the exemption is intended for the licensees and their own property, then I'd like us to narrow the exemption, or narrow this language to make sure that licensees, hiring a licensee to advertise your property doesn't get you out of the registration requirement.
Okay. And I think the change I suggested does that.
And what was the change?
As I was just finishing writing it.
That's okay.
That number one would start off, the property shall not be advertised or operated as, and it would continue, without registering. And that way, since I've taken out owner or other person, the violation flows if it's being done, if it's not exempt, and the property itself is being done by whomever.
So the state code says those individuals don't need to register, and we're saying that's fine, we won't make those individuals register,
Right.
but the property shall not be advertised or used in this fashion without
Right,
somebody registering, without registering the property. So
Again, I don't have the state code sitting in front of me, but the way we have it written in the exemptions, the first one identifies people, the salespeople and the brokers. The second and third ones both talk about properties. And my recollection is that is how the state code talks about it. In other words, it's not consistent saying people who do this or properties that do this. It lists them both that way. But I still think that would cover.
you think that change of language would address Supervisor Lumpkin's concerns without running afoul of the state code?
I believe so.
Okay, that's all we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody else understand what was going on there?
I think so. I do have another question, though.
Another question?
Yeah, maybe, will the registrant with a bed and breakfast or short term, will they pay the transient tax?
That depends on how much money they will have to get a business license, and depending on how much money they bring in is whether they would need to pay it. That would be the tax or not.
So don't we have a 2% hotel room tax?
There is
Is
a
that-
transient occupancy tax
Right.
and also potentially a business license tax.
Right.
The business license certainly has a minimum you have to make.
Right.
I don't know that the transient occupancy tax has that. It may be per room rented. I don't
Tourism,
recall.
important for tourism.
And so your question is that TOT tax, transient occupancy,
So-
collected on
Yeah.
short-term hosted and unhosted and bed and breakfast, all of these transient?
I believe it is. I believe Ms.
okay.
Brown has told me that she collects a little bit now from Dover Hall and some of the other places that do have beds and breakfasts.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was thinking that was the main reason, well, one of the reasons for registration. Registration, so we know where the issues might pop up, and also for being able to collect proper tax?
Far be it from me to say why the General Assembly did anything,
Right.
but
It's all about the
Trying
tax.
to get inside their head.
that's a crapshoot.
One more thing.
Yes, Ms. Laskala, yep.
Okay, so Ms. Hunter, so we're asking them to register. I get it. I understand that part. But they also have to get a business license, is that correct? And the amount of tax that they pay depends on their revenue. It's a slide sale. Okay. So all you're doing, the fact that they're registering with the planning department has got nothing to do with taxing.
No, we just want
That's more
it,
with regulation and
right.
meeting guidelines.
The purpose of us wanting that registration information is to have that contact information if we get complaints, because this is a by right use.
So I don't guess this code should say you need to get a business license. That's not the proper place for it.
No.
Thank you. Okay. Got it. Okay.
Anything, I had a quick one, and I think it may already be covered. I'm on page, 98 again, just below the C, the principal dwelling one, just below that, there was a residential appearance, property. At one of the public sessions or community sessions, I believe someone somewhere raised the issue of what about signage at the end of the driveway? Should it say the Goochland Homestead and neon lights? And does this residential appearance make sure that there isn't a big commercial sign? I know we have sign ordinance as well that would come into play, but could you just let me know, share some thoughts about the considerations for signage for these kind of properties?
So in the residential district, you can have a sign up to 6 square feet. So they could have a little placard, 2x4, over their door that says X and X guest in or something like that. But, nothing larger than that.
Okay, so there's just enough of a sign to say, this is where you turn into the 100-acre property that you've, okay. All right, good, thank you, that addresses that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am?
if I may,
Sure.
I have been able to, Mr. Lumpkins was able to share with me the state law that the registration is based off of. And it actually says that a person who is represented by a real estate agent doesn't have to register. And so the situation that he was concerned about, that an owner could simply hire a real estate agent so that they don't have to register, was intended to be an exemption under the state law. So it would be appropriate to go back to the wording as it appears in your packet for the registration, rather than what I had suggested to be amended, because in fact, the state law specifically says, no, if you own the property, or if you're an owner who hires a real estate broker, then you can't be required to register.
And I do
Okay.
just want to point out that, again, this would only be for the bed and breakfast and short-term rental that are owner occupied. So that would be like you hiring a real estate agent to rent out a room in your bedroom. So I think it would be more of a concern if we were saying you could have the on-hosted ones by right, and then you would have this issue. But I don't see it as a big a concern with the way.
But would Airbnb or some of the others be considered agents?
The exemption's fairly specific with respect to having to be licensed by the real estate board. So, Airbnb itself as an entity, I don't believe is or would be eligible to, so.
Okay.
Okay, well, I assume you're still reluctant to speculate as to what they were thinking when they did this. So
I
I
am,
won't push
yes.
you on that. I won't push you on that one. All right, does everybody understand what just took place there? Okay, yes,
Okay.
yes,
If I may
sir.
get some clarity, because I'm confused, but, so does that mean that I could have an
Come on,
Air?
breaking it up into sections, we were going to be
Yeah.
so good.
So I could go ahead and do this and not register if I hire my neighbor who's a real estate agent to manage it?
If you're renting a room in
So
your
he just calls me and
home-
says, hey, I got somebody coming this weekend. Get out of that bedroom.
Again, that appears to be the exemption intended by the state law, which would mean
Right.
we're required to have it.
Okay.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, it's one sentence, if I may.
Yeah, sure, go right ahead, Mr. Lumpkins.
No ordinance shall require a person to register pursuant to this section if such person is licensed by the real estate board or is a property owner who is represented by a real estate license. So that does seem to
Pretty
cover
clear.
that. How about penalty? Do we have penalty provision in our statute if they're in violation?
We have penalties under the zoning violation, so that would, if they were in violation of this ordinance, it would be a zoning violation, and we would process it that way. That is a long, slow process, but we could get there.
Well, just, and I'm not familiar off the top of my head with that, but this same code section I'm just reading from, creation of registry for short-term rental properties, which has the restriction I just read. It says, if a locality adopts a registry ordinance pursuant to this section, such ordinance may include a penalty not to exceed $500 per violation for an operator required to register. So I don't know if our,
We did not choose to adopt any of the additional violations. We would just handle it through the zoning ordinance.
As of today, your zoning ordinance provides that any violation is a Class 3 misdemeanor with a maximum $500 fine. So if they in fact did not register as they were required, it would be a violation of Section 51 and subject to up to a $500 fine. So today, that's consistent.
And we typically, our goal is through violations is the abatement of the violation, not for fines. So that's why we did not adopt that.
Some more clarification. You mentioned the exemption for registration pertain to hosted?
It's written in here, remember, as a development standard. Right now, what you're looking at is the development standard, so that is a bed and breakfast or a hosted. I would be surprised if when a CUP, which is the way the others would come, came before you, if they didn't also have registration requirements. But those would be written in as a condition of the CUP, if I'm correct, Ms.
So the exemptions would
We would know what
likely
to-
be included in the CUP as well, since we're still not able to require an unhosted to register if they meet the exemptions. So right now, the only reason we have it here for the hosted is for the by right. And then if something comes through with the CUP, then we would lift a lot of the same language and do it then too. That clarifies it, because when you drew the distinction, I didn't think the state law drew a distinction whether it's hosted or unhosted. They're just exempted. So they would be exempted in either case. It's just we're not taking care of that here because it's not a CUP. Okay,
That's right.
great, thank you. Okay, any other questions or clarification or fuzziness? Crystal clear?
Got it.
All right. Now that we've gotten through the staff presentation, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anyone who would like to come forward and comment on this in favor or against or beg for clarification, now would be the time
More clarification.
to do that. Seeing none? Oh, good. Well, as you come forward, I'll just remind you to give us your name, address, and you know the drill.
We know his address.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Jonathan Lau, 1521 Mannequin Road. I was given the opportunity, and I appreciate it very much, this was sent to me prior, and man, I tell you, it makes all the world in the difference, or all the difference in the world. And I so much appreciate it, but as this started to unfold, y'all started going in the weeds, and I went right there with you. So it's your questions that's kind of prompted some of this. If I'm 18 years old, I can buy a house, I believe. Is that correct? Most banks, I'm a recovering banker, and I can buy a house. And my wife may be a sweet young thing of 18 too, and she might be my designee. But this doesn't let her be my designee because she has to be 21. She can join the Army. She can play the lottery. She can buy cigarettes. Can't buy drinks. But is 21 an arbitrary number? But if I'm an 18-year-old property owner and my wife is 18 and I make her my designee, I'm in violation.
Again, these are the conditions for by right.
I know.
If you can't meet this by right, you can come in for a CUP and ask for your
Okay.
designee to be 18.
Okay, all right. At 18, we're allowed to put the uniform on, but we can't run would it be upsetting to the board if you change that to 18? Just throwing that out. Second one, it said 3 violations and you're out. Well, and I guess somebody's going to keep record of what the violations are, but if you're out, we're going to have a blacklist. I mean, how do we know that this property is no longer allowed to do B&B rentals? Or I'm not sorry, B&B, but short-term rentals. I guess we'll have a bad list, a sort of a FIFA drug list where they failed the drug test or something. And then it was already explained what violations for non-registration was. And I mean, I've gone on the Airbnb site and I've found people out there, and I believe Ms. Hunter has a lot to do already. And so I guess this is not yet a big issue. I hope it never becomes one, but at some point, I guess, and I've heard members of this board say, why have ordinances if we're not going to enforce them? Just kind of maybe putting up a little flare there that somebody's going to have to keep an eye on this. And it's not, I'm not volunteering, just so you know. But, and then the final thing is that the VRLTA is a industry organization, the Virginia Restaurant Lodging Travel Association. It's about $1,000 a year. Tom Lusk is their counsel, their lobbyist, I suppose. And VRLTA, I promise you, has spent a lot of time down at the General Assembly on this whole short-term occupancy, as this sort of melds in with the overall tourism. For $1,000 a year, that might be a pretty good place to start. It gives you some access to some firepower down there that addresses these things. But this is a really good ordinance in many, many ways. I'm very appreciative that I got to look at it ahead of time. I just would suggest you might want to make 18 instead of 21, just because it is the age of majority. I mean, you can borrow money at the bank, you can serve our country. You should maybe have a by right opportunity to rent out a room in your house too if you wanted to, and make your wife or your husband. Might be some cougars out there that have 18-year-old husbands, I don't know. And that's all I'll say, because the red light went off. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lyle. Appreciate those comments. Would anyone else like to come forward and during the public hearing? All right, seeing none, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, any additional comments or questions or clarification?
Mr. Chairman, the only comment I would make is we've had some violators already, even without the ordinance, that were renting their property without following our previous standard, which was the bed and breakfast, and we were able to deal with them. So I'm not sure that that's a huge issue. In response to Mr. Lyle, and at the age of 18, I'm not sure I should have been allowed to ride a bicycle, much less rent a house, but I would be okay with changing that if it makes sense.
Other thoughts?
I don't know, I mean, an 18-year-old homeowner is different than,
Yeah.
I mean, an 18-year-old homeowner is different than an 18-year-old. So I don't know if I'd be inclined, I don't know if I'd be inclined to change it.
Okay. I mean, we know that 18-year-olds can do certain things and can't do others. Alcohol consumption and maybe, but certainly can do it if they petition with a conditional use. So there's a potential there to be able to do it. But.
Right.
So we're not saying no. We're just saying there's a different process. That's all.
Right. That's the way I see it.
Okay. Any thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, I'm fine with 21, and I'll go ahead and move that we adopt the ordinance with the amendments as follows in 10.1 bed and breakfast. Add the same septic limitations of number of residents allowed by the septic system permit that appears in the definition under short-term rental. And then under definition of hotel, change the number, a facility, comma, with permitted occupancy of 11 or more, comma. With those two amendments, I move that we adopt the ordinance as presented.
Okay, it's been moved that we adopt the ordinance amendment with those two modifications. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkin?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Okay, the vote is unanimous. That ordinance is adopted.
Okay.
Next item, Ms. Hunter again, District 3.
Good evening again. We're not quite done with short-term rental on Hosted. This is a conditional use permit for our recently, in compliance with our recently just adopted ordinance. Ms. Ellen Pons has submitted the CUP application. She lives at, the property she owns is at 2094 Shepherdtown Road, which is located in the central portion of the county. The property is rural enhancement area. It's a large piece of property and surrounded by agricultural uses and some smaller RR and RP subdivisions. You can see it's a very large piece of property. The applicant does not live on the property. She lives out of state. There is a second home on the property, which is permitted by code. There is someone who lives in that home. However, they are not. They do not monitor the bed and breakfast or anything. So this property is known as Clover Hill. She does have an existing 2,200 square feet that has 2 units that are rented out. Unit 1 is 1,362 square feet. This is a picture of it. And then the rear part of the house is what they call the Rosalie House. That's about 862 square feet, and that is also rented. Community meeting was held on April 16th. The planning commissioner, Mr. Duke, and one neighbor attended the meeting. The neighbor did support the request. And at the planning commission meeting, the planning commission did approve this with a 5-0 vote, and nobody spoke at the public hearing. So this is a lot of the same conditions that we just talked about. So these were the development standards that were by right. Since this one is, since she doesn't live on the property, it's the CUP. So the conditions are both units would be limited to no more than 8 people. That's based on the septic system. From the health department, they could increase that up to 10 with changes to their septic system. No outdoor music after 11. The owner shall post and maintain no trespassing signs along the boundary, instructing guests not to trespass on adjacent properties, maintaining a residential appearance, no hunting or firearms discharged. They would ensure that the renters are noticed about the following conditions, about the number of people, the music, no trespassing and hunting that I just went over. They have to have smoke alarms and carbon monoxide. Again, a violation provision. And we are proposing a 5-year time frame to see how the property is maintained and if we get any complaints, and then our standard transfer of ownership or lease of the property. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Ms. Hunter?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
So the number of occupancy, the 8 that we're talking about without additional work on the septic, that's both units combined?
Correct.
Total of 8?
Yes,
So,
and
okay.
that's based on the septic system.
Correct, okay.
Okay, anything else for Ms. Hunter? No. Okay, thank you for that. Is the applicant here this evening? Would the applicant like to come forward and add anything to what's been said already? Okay, fair enough. Just wanted to give you the opportunity in case you needed one. All right? Thank you, appreciate that. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anyone like to come forward and speak either in favor or opposed, or offer comments on this? Now is the time to come forward. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, any additional discussions or questions?
Mr. Chairman, the only other comment I have, it seems like the use here, according to our new CUP policy that we put in, it's a light enough use. Why, 5 years, 8 people living on 100 and some acres, a 5-year COP seems short to me. I would think we might want to do maybe 10.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
Is this, now this may be plead the fifth type stuff. Has this property been used for outside rentals in the past? And have there been any complaints?
This is a known bed and breakfast operation in the county. When we started working on this, we did send notices to all the ones that we knew that were operating, letting them know, and Ms. Pons responded immediately and did everything to bring it into compliance.
So we're not aware of any complaints from neighbors
Never.
In the past?
No.
And it looked, I didn't see the satellite too quickly, but it looks like it's relatively centrally located. It's not on the edge of the property?
It's a large piece of property, and the house is pretty much dead
So
center.
it's right dead center, so the proximity-wise. Okay, and there will be no trespassing posted at the, so people don't wander on other, okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, Ms. Hunter, I wanted to just be clear, I'm going to have another question in a little bit, I think, but all the paperwork before us looks like the applicant is L&B Ponds LLC, so is that correct? It's a limited liability company is the applicant?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I was getting ready to ask, I did need to hear from the applicant on this. You know where I'm going, I guess.
So I'm Ellen Pons, and Clover Hill was owned by my great-uncle, Jim Ball, who was a member of the community. He bought it in the 1950s, and it's been in my family since then, and I'm just trying to maintain it for my children. I do, while it is unhosted, I don't live there, I'm here probably 50 days of the year. I stay there myself when there are other people not there. I'm a farmer in Maryland, so I don't work weekends, weekdays, normal schedules. I can use the house when others aren't using it. It's a great situation for me. I maintain the house and property in better shape than I would have if I didn't have the income from this source. The average age of the people that come are probably 45 to 60, and it's generally multi-families, like family reunions. There's so many wedding venues in the area. It's a central location for that, and it's been a great situation for me, and my experience has only been positive, and that's what I expect to continue. I usually have a conversation with people through social media. It's not an instant book kind of thing like you're guaranteed a spot there. We have a conversation. I try to find out the people that are going to stay at my house because I want them to take care of it. But anyway, so.
Yeah, I did have a question for you, and you heard me ask Ms. Hunter about the limited liability company. The SCC State Corporation Commission shows L&B Ponds LLC is purged. That tells me that it's been at least 5 years since you've paid anything to the SCC filing fees.
Oh, really?
So it's completely purged, so the entity doesn't exist.
Now.
So that's why I'm saying if the applicant is a limited liability company, well, it doesn't exist.
Okay, well, that's news to me. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. That was formed when I bought the property for my protection, as I do lease the property year-round for agricultural use. It's in land use, and I have horse boarding people and other operations there. So I don't know if that's so.
Yeah, Ms. Hunter, do we do a search for the land records? I imagine there's somebody look at the land records and see, so, to verify that the deed is in the name of,
It's listed that way with the owner of the real property is L&B Ponds LLC.
That is the owner.
As
So
the
this
owner.
isn't a
So my
management
taxes
company.
go out, so.
Yeah.
It must be, it could be a failure to pay a fee that I have not been aware of.
yeah, that's,
I remember that with.
Every year, it's an annual fee.
$50
I live in
every year.
Maryland,
Yeah.
so.
But then they'll, when it gets to the purge stage, though, they'll terminate you, and I think you have 5 years, I believe it's 5 years before they'll just purge you from the system, so it's been a little while, so legally, the entity doesn't exist. I don't know how we want to deal with this, but I think we need to get, you need to get the
Sure.
entity reinstated, because otherwise, we have an applicant that doesn't exist.
Of course, ultimately with a zoning action, the conditions attach to the property and the property owner and run with it. So ultimately, if the LLC doesn't legally exist and she's the property owner, she is obligated to act in conformance with these conditions.
So they run to the property and the owner regardless of who that is.
Yes, I mean,
And,
if she sold the property tomorrow and it's somebody else, these conditions still exist. But you're certainly correct about the, non-existent
I don't want to get into your business, but I'll ask one more question. Are you the sole owner of the LLC? Okay.
Okay. And so the LLC is on the deed and the title, and it's not a management company that's managing a property that's owned by somebody else. This is not a management, it's, the actual deed is the LLC. And,
Yeah.
well, because that raises a whole different question, but you're shaking your head with, this is,
Our records show that she conveyed it to her LLC.
So it's-
She was the prior record owner, the LLC is now the record owner.
so the LLC is the record owner of the property, okay.
With regard to purging an LLC, as y'all know, is left to the SCC. Yes, anyway,
Yeah.
State Corporation Commission, it's hard to say, but.
Yeah.
So from a property record standpoint, we could enforce should she violate, again,
Okay.
as Tara said, her individually.
We could. Okay, so I guess we'd encourage you to consult with your people. Because I guess you're,
It's more than a few things that this will.
because I'm not an attorney, but if the LLC gets set aside, there's some implications for you individually. So I would encourage you to talk to your,
For sure.
professional advisors to
That's a good thing.
give you advice.
You need an attorney.
Yeah, I can say that.
She's heard from 3 of them. None of whom are hers.
Two
but-
actual attorneys and one that's not. Just plays
Free
on
legal
TV.
advice there.
I'm not an attorney.
Okay, so you've questioned, are you done,
No,
Mr.
no,
Lumpkins?
thank you,
You're,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for bringing
Is
that
this something
to
that
our
we
attention.
could modify in the CUP to whereas L&B Ponds instead of LLC?
Well, I guess the question for the attorney is, wouldn't it be necessary, or does it run to the property and to the owner regardless?
It runs with the property.
So,
So it's not necessary. Okay.
okay.
And then, since that is the name that's currently on the deed, if it's currently deeded to that entity.
Yeah, no, I think it's
then-
good. I think Ms. Pons is here to represent, she's the sole owner, and we know she deeded it to her LLC before, and I think you said you're gonna talk to somebody about
Oh,
getting
absolutely.
records squared away, so
Okay,
I think we're on track as far as I'm concerned.
okay, thank you for that. Ms. McGee, you're okay with this as well so far? Okay, thank you. Other questions for?
Would it be appropriate, or does it make sense, Ms. McGee, to have it as a condition that she maintain the LLC status? Or just let's don't go there?
I mean, if it
I'm
trans-
just asking.
Again, legally, it doesn't have an effect for
Okay,
you.
so I guess so. Okay.
Thank you very much for that. Glad you were here this evening. That helped us out. Okay, so we've heard from staff and the applicant. We've had the public hearing. Is there any additional questions or clarification? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion on this one.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the application before us for the conditional use permit for 29 2094 Shepherdtown Road, tax map number 43-1-0-75-0.
Okay, it's been moved. Do we have a second?
I'll second. And can I make a friendly request? We talked about maybe making it 10 years or longer than the 5 years proposed. We already have proof, I mean, it's been in operation and with no issues.
I'll withdraw and amend my motion to amend it to 10 years.
Okay, so we have a friendly amendment on the motion, and is that acceptable to the second?
I'll amend my second.
And acceptable to the second. So we have a revised motion on the table to approve with the amendment of the timing from 5 years to 10 years, and it's been properly seconded. Is there any additional discussion before we do a roll call vote? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Badesky, could you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Lumpkins.
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Vote is unanimous. You have your approval. Okay. On break? It's really, maybe halfway through. Okay,
It's ready.
yeah, we can break now if we want, because the rest of the schedule pretty quick, right? So they're all wits. All right, so maybe board, how about a break or recess?
10 minutes?
10-minute break? Is that right?
Now that
Yeah.
Whitney's up
For
there.
me?
Get a consensus? Break? Okay. All right. At this point, this board will take a break for about 10 minutes and then return back at 20 of to continue considering the public hearings for this evening. Thank you. Get back on schedule here. Whitney Marshall, I guess you're going to walk us through the next several public hearings.
I believe there are 6 of them.
Great.
Some more involved than others, so we're going to start with the tougher one first, if that's all right with you.
In order?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's start with the tougher one first then.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Whit Marshall, the Assistant County Attorney. This is the first of several ordinance amendments before you this evening for consideration. The first one, this one is, the others are related to code updates due to the General Assembly session that just ended, well, sort of ended. This one is part of our codification of community development things and clarifications and things like this. So this ordinance amendment, the purpose of it is to codify the 50-lot policy. These amendments are both in the zoning and subdivision ordinance. As I go through them, I'll identify those for you. The general rule is that any street that serves 50 or more lots must have 2 points of access to public roads. So that's the governing principle of this policy. The purpose of this amendment, it allows road networks that adequately provide for continuity and interconnectivity of streets. It provides additional routing options that can distribute traffic, as well as proper extension to subsequent phases of development of adjacent properties. So this is truly a policy that facilitates better planned streets and better outcomes overall as the county develops further. Within the subdivision ordinance, we have 2 proposed changes there. One is to remove language from one section and create a section just for the 50-lot policy language. And then the third change I'm going to go through with you is to add a provision clarifying standards for multifamily developments, which previously had not been included in the ordinance. So on to the first change. This one's fairly simple. For some reason, the 50-lot policy language was under the cul-de-sac provision. People won't know to look for it there, so we're proposing that that be removed there. And then the second change is where we are planning to put it. So the 50-lot policy, what it has requirements, subdivisions with 50 or more lots shall have a minimum of 2 separate permanent access points onto public roads. It requires the subdivisions be planned so that one street isn't the sole access point for 50 or more lots, so it's also a safety concern. Also, our proposed language will cross-reference the requirements for building permits, certificates of occupancy in the zoning ordinance, and those requirements all those requirements depend on the approved POD. You may recall several months ago, you adopted an ordinance dealing with the approval of POD and the phasing of developments. So this dovetails with this. and focuses more on the access. The third change, proposed change, would address multifamily developments. They're slightly different in character, so they have a different measurement. So the requirement is to add 2 access points for multifamily developments with more than 82 dwelling units. So regardless of the number of buildings, 82 condos, townhomes, in whatever configuration, at that number for the multifamily, you would be required to have 2 points of access. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have with regard to this.
Questions for Ms. Marshall?
I had a question on the first slide, but then as you move along, I think it's clear, because the first slide's any street serving 50 or more lots must have 2 points, but it may not be the same street. So what you're really looking for is to have 2 exit points on any subdivision, which I think is clearer later in the new definition.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, other questions or clarification? If there's a development with 40 single-family and 40 multifamily,
I defer to our community development staff as to how that would be worked out.
and this isn't a trick question, because I believe we have one underway right now that is a combination.
If they're a combination, I believe they would be under the multifamily. It would be part of a multifamily development, so that would put you into the multifamily.
So for instance, the one that's going on now, how was that viewed or how was that analyzed? I mean, I guess there was so many units it didn't matter, but in the 502, don't we have a mixture of different types?
Oh, the HH
So,
They more than exceed the 50
In
in
that
either
case.
case in 80.
so let's say it was 40 and 40.
I would say we would look at it on a case-by-case basis, but it's all based on traffic, and that's where it seems kind of weird that number 82 for multifamily, but that's based on, it generates the same traffic as 50 single-family detached houses, so we would probably look at it on that basis, looking at how the traffic is.
Okay. Stand fast for just a second. Maybe we can see what our county attorney, Ms. McGee, thinks about if it was for, let me phrase this, the ordinance amendment as presented, whether it's silent on that or or how it would be interpreted under what's presented legally as opposed to, a one-off and we'll look at it if and when it happens. How would it be treated under the language that's before us, I guess, is one way to.
I can't say I have a good answer for that, unfortunately.
Okay.
I think
Like
we
I
have to
said,
look at the project.
I would. It would
'Cause
depend.
If it's a project that has multifamily as a component, but also single-family, then I think that would be multifamily. Because it would be rezoned for like a PUD or something like that, right? If it's like an MPOD. MPD.
It gets a little more complicated, because when you look at like what H.H. Hunt is under the building code, sometimes they're classified as multifamily, sometimes they're not. They look like that, but they're not. They're still classified as single family because of the way they're configured. So it's a more complicated issue than just saying townhouses and single families. It really depends on the development, how they're set up, whether they're on individual lots, whether they're not, I mean, it's just a lot of factors that come into it.
Okay.
Mr. Peterson, Ms. Marshall and Ms. Byrd have worked on this more so than I. This has been their
Okay.
project. So I think if I jumped in now, it would not be clarifying. I might be mucking it up.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate that. Ms. Hunterly, you would like to weigh in?
So this basically is a policy that we're now codifying. If a situation we don't have any current situations like that. So any situation that comes through new would go through a rezoning process. And at that time, we would evaluate it on how many access points they need. So I think we could address it through the rezoning and the proffers of the case. So.
Okay. Okay, so in the absence of clarity that specifically addresses it, through the process and the application process.
We would
you'd
have an
Work with
opportunity.
the applicant, and then if and when it came before us, you would say, here's the issues and here how they were treated,
Right.
and here's whether or not it complies
Yes.
technically with our,
The nu-
okay.
Yeah, the
And
number
then-
of access points is a critical component of what we would look at with and evaluate a case for health, safety, and welfare, and we would evaluate it then of whether we believe it needs 2 entrances or 1.
Okay.
And would a multifamily need a POD?
Yes.
So a POD is going to show the number of accesses, you're going to work it out through that as well, is that
Preferably, it
correct?
would be through the rezoning process, but yes, it
Right.
also part of the POD. So
Okay.
you get 2 shots at the apple.
Okay. Okay, great. I'm not trying to either create a problem or confuse. I'm trying to clarify and clear up. It may not be working, but that's the, okay. So special situations would be taken into account, given the special unique circumstances, and they would work through the process, and there'd be an answer and a recommendation, but there'd be at least 2 opportunities for public input and for this board to weigh the characteristics and reach a decision.
I'd be curious too, my recollection is that there may be that the fire code may also address it, and if the fire code addressed it, I don't think it would say multifamily or single family, it could just be dwelling units, and that might lay in, but I don't have a recollection of a section number or so forth, but I do think there's another area, because it is a public safety interest.
Okay. Okay.
Just one.
Other thoughts or questions? Yes, Ms. Loslett?
So, Mr. Chairman, I guess it's back to Whit or Ms. Hunter. So 82 dwelling units on multifamily, it says a minimum of 2 separate permanent points of access. So if you have 820, then dwelling units, or some big number larger than 82, then that's part of the POD process, is that right?
That's my understanding, is it's just addresses the first 2
This is
interests.
the minimum.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Also, this provision is within the POD provisions. So,
Right.
so the multifamily portion is part of the POD provisions within the zoning ordinance.
That makes sense.
I mean subdivision. Is this in zoning? Zoning, pardon me.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mayor. Yes,
if I,
sir.
if I may ask, so what defines 82 dwelling units? Is it, do they drive less cars? I mean, I'm not sure why 82 for one and 50 for the other.
It's the assigned counts, traffic counts per day that the Highway Transportation Council assigns.
So they're saying that an 82 unit
Generates the exact same number of vehicle trips per
50.
day as 50 single-family detached houses, according to the Transportation Board.
So one way to do that would have been to adjust the 82, there's, per unit, and then the 50 per unit, and then just adjust it so that you get the same, once you exceed the combined expected traffic, there's your trigger.
Yes.
But that would take some adjusting in fractions and dividing and that
A
kind of
lot
thing.
of math.
I take math.
A lot of math.
So, okay. Other thoughts or questions? Okay, that gets us through staff presentation. Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone like to come forward and comment in favor, in opposition, or just make comments on this? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. All right, board, any additional questions or discussion on this? Okay, seeing none or hearing none, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure how to describe it. It just says the following proposed ordinance amendments. So the motion is that we adopt it. as outlined, no changes.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. To amend Article 7 of the subdivision ordinance as presented. Do it.
And it also has Article 21 of the zoning ordinance as
And
well.
Article 21 as well. Okay, as presented. All right, Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes, that's unanimous as well. Okay, Ms. Marshall, on to, was that the toughest one first? Was that what that was?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's downhill from here.
Cruising now.
All right. As I mentioned earlier, the remainder of these proposed ordinance amendments are the result of the most recent General Assembly session. The first one was a county-requested statutory change with regard to our EDA. There are two proposed changes to the ordinance. The first is to reduce the number of directors from 7 to 5, and also to reduce the quorum required from 4 to 3 directors to act. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about this potential change.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Marshall on this change?
If this were to be approved tonight, it would be effective immediately.
Yes, ma'am.
And how many members do we currently have?
5.
We do have 5. That sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Marshall? Okay, thank you for that. We'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone like to come forward and speak on this issue? Now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Any additional discussion or questions, Board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the amendment to Section 2-106 to change the number of members on the Goochland County Economic Development Authority from 7 to 5.
Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved in second. Mr. Badesky, a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. It's unanimous. Thank you. You're on a roll.
All right.
Next up.
This next one, this next proposed ordinance amendment would give more discretion to the local health director as to whether to quarantine a police dog who's bitten a person. It allows him or her to consider proof that the dog has both a rabies certificate and any certificates for training, be it police work, first responder, or military work. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, this is also pursuant to change in state law. Okay.
That is correct.
Any questions for Ms. Marshall?
Dr. Frank has also looked at this proposed ordinance revision, so.
This, presumably among other things, addresses where there's a police dog whose job it is to bite the bad guys, that they're not automatically put in the penalty box.
Correct. This gives
Okay.
them discretion to spring them from puppy prison.
Okay. All right, any other thoughts or comments or questions? Okay, if not, thank you for that presentation. Go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone like to come forward? Now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Any discussion or questions, Board? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Badesky, a roll call vote, please.
Motion?
Motion?
Motion.
Why don't we do a motion first? I'll entertain a motion. Why don't we do that?
Mr. Chairman, I
You passed the test.
move to amend the Goochland County Code to adopt state code changes related to quarantining a police dog as presented.
Okay, it's been moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved in second. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, now we'll go with a roll call vote. Mr. Badesky, please.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Okay, thank you for that. Next item up.
Yes, sir. The next proposed ordinance amendment deals with the maintenance of on-site sewage systems. It deals with the maintenance of both conventional, which are your septic systems, and alternative sewage systems. First, we're going the proposed change is to add a definition of maintenance to the conventional on-site sewage system provisions. It currently lacks that. The second is to amend the definition of maintenance in the alternative on-site sewage system provisions within our code. Both definitions are pretty much the same. They clarify that adjustments and in-kind replacement of parts for wear and tear are maintenance, so long as no construction permit is required to do the work. So some examples have been added to both definitions. Maintenance work does include in-kind replacement of things like light bulbs, fuses, filters, pumps, sewer lines, conveyance line, distribution lines, and leader lines. However, maintenance work would not include the replacement of tanks, drain field piping, subsurface drain fields, or any work requiring a construction permit. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, so long as it doesn't relate to actually how sewage systems work.
And all these definitional changes were changes in the state code?
That is correct.
Okay. Questions from Ms. Marshall? Okay, thank you for that presentation. We'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anybody that would like to come forward and speak to this item, and now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any additional discussion or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that, that we adopt the proposed ordinance amendment to define what constitutes sewage system maintenance and to clarify the code as presented by Ms. Marshall.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Lachelette?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Okay, next item.
This next proposed ordinance amendment adds two definitions to our ordinance. The first, this is dealing with taxes that are deferred, special taxes that are deferred for elderly and disabled. Goochland County has a program. There are some people in that program. For certain things like ad valorem taxes or TCSD, they may be deferred taxes, which means eventually they will have to be repaid upon some sort of triggering event. Normally that triggering event is the sale of the home. However, in estate planning and things along those lines, there are certain transfers which the General Assembly is specifically saying don't trigger it. So we are adjusting our ordinance to reflect that. So we're defining a non-qualified transfer as any transfer of real property as a gift. So there's no, or there's inadequate consideration paid that is not to a spouse, including the creation of a joint tenancy for life, to a revocable inter vivos trust over which the qualified owner or with their spouse has the power of revocation, or to an irrevocable trust under which the qualified owner or with their spouse has a life estate or a continuing right of support. So those types of transfers would not trigger the obligation to pay any deferred taxes. We also are adding a definition for a qualified owner, and that's simply the owner of the real property that qualified for the tax deferral. And then again, just to bring it home, any deferred taxes become due once the property is sold or if there is a non-qualified transfer of the property. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
So, Ms. Marshall, that first line, there's a double negative.
Yes, sir, that's how it's in the state code.
Non-qualified are ones that are not.
That is correct.
So qualified is ones that are.
That is correct. Trying to follow the state code.
I understand.
You know we love our nons and our nots and our,
Yes, we do, in our General Assembly.
absolutely.
Questions from Ms. Marshall on this one? Thank you for that presentation.
Leave it to our attorney too.
At this point, we'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone who would like to come forward and speak to this issue, now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Okay, any additional questions or discussion, on the board? If not, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the adoption of the amendment to section 13-63.1 deferred special taxes as presented this evening.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Ms. Lachelet?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes?
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. It's unanimous. That ordinance amendment is approved as well. And this is your last item?
Unfortunately, yes.
This is it?
But there are 3 subparts, so
Oh, good.
these are changes to our purchasing or procurement ordinances based on recent changes to state laws. You know, annually there are changes to these provisions. I've broken them down one on each page. The first one adds an exception for stream restoration, stormwater management, and associated construction and maintenance for those activities. That's exempted from the general prohibition against using cooperative procurement. So in positive language, you're allowed to use cooperative procurement for those services. And artificial turf was previously put in this exemption. So you're now allowed to use cooperative procurement for those. So we've updated the ordinance to reflect that. Do y'all have any questions about this particular provision?
So it's exemptions from the prohibition.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's why we go to school.
Make sure I follow all this.
Which turf was included last year whether we approved?
Yeah.
So that was the party, the first part, yeah. Paid by the word or by the, I'm sorry to interrupt. Ms. Please
You're the
continue.
chairman. You're
Please-
running the show.
Please continue.
All right, the second proposed change, this will increase the caps for which you can use the small purchase with regard to professional services. Currently in our ordinance and previously in the state code, the cap was at $60,000. Now it's raised to $80,000, so we're requesting to amend our ordinance to reflect the state code change. It also raises the maximum amount of the contracts for architectural or engineering services related to multiple construction projects, so on-call services of those types, from $500,000 to $750,000 for the cap. I'm happy to answer any questions y'all may have about those.
Any questions on this part?
All right, and there's one more, and this one's fairly simple. It's one of those things that they needed to clarify, something that likely did not need to be clarified. But what these provisions do, they clarify that when you submit a bid or a proposal to a local government, you can't say your entire bid is trade secret or confidential. You can't claim your prices are confidential. So this would reflect those changes. And those are the 3 changes before you this evening with regard to purchasing, and I'm happy to answer questions you may have.
Ms. McGee?
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
I was going to say Ms. Witt, I apologize. Ms. Marshall's presentation is accurate. There is one other minor change in the cap one, and that is the single project for the architecture and engineering. Any single project used to have a limit of 100,000, and it's raised to 150,000. And that is reflected in your packet.
It's in the packet correctly. Okay, good, thank you. All right, any questions or clarification on any of the 3 sub-provisions of this presentation? Thank you for your presentation. At this point, I'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone that would like to come forward and speak to any of those 3 sub-presentations, now would be the time. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, any additional questions or clarification? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the following proposed ordinance amendment relating to Section 11-21, 11-28, and 11-39 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Ms. Lachelet?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. And I believe that completes your presentations. I want to thank you, Ms. Marshall and Ms. McGee, for working very hard to keep the county code in alignment with the state code, given the frequency and magnitude of some of the changes that take place. I'm sure that gives you a lot to do, but we appreciate all your efforts to keep us current. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you for your patience.
Yes, sir. Okay. Is there anything else, any other business to come before this body? Seeing none and hearing none, in the board packet and I believe in the advertisement, it mentioned that on August 7th, we would start at 1 p.m. with a major thoroughfare plan workshop. That has been postponed, and so it will not take place on August 7th at 1 p.m. That date will be set in the future. So this board, when we adjourn this evening, will adjourn until its regularly scheduled 3 p.m. meeting on August 7th, 2018, with a 7 p.m. public hearing meeting to follow. That said, at this point, I will adjourn this meeting and thank everyone for coming, and travel home safe and enjoy the 4th.